Recording in progress.
Did we start recording? All right, good morning, everybody. This is the Wednesday, June 16th, 2021 morning session of the Portland City Council. Good morning, Keelan. Please call the roll.
Good morning, Mayor, members of council. Ryan.
Here.
Hardesty.
Good morning. Here.
Maps. Well, it looks like Commissioner Maps is having trouble with the audio. I can see that he's present if that is sufficient.
He's here.
Rubio. Wheeler.
Here, under Portland City Code and state law, the City Council is holding this meeting electronically. All members of the council are attending remotely by video and teleconference, and the city has made several avenues available to the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The meeting is available to the public on the city's YouTube channel, eGovPDX, www.portlandoregon.gov/video, and Channel 30. The public can also provide written testimony to council by emailing the council clerk at cctestimony@portlandoregon.gov. The council is taking these steps as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and the need to limit in-person contact and to promote physical distancing. The pandemic is an emergency that threatens the public health, safety, and welfare, which requires us to meet remotely by electronic communications. Thank you all for your patience, your understanding, and your flexibility as we manage through these challenging circumstances to conduct the city's business. We'll now hear from legal counsel on the rules of order and decorum. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. To participate in council meetings, you may sign up in advance with the council clerk's office for communications to briefly speak about any subject. You may also sign up for public testimony on resolutions or the first readings of ordinances. The published council agenda at portlandoregon.gov/auditor contains information about how and when you may sign up for testimony while City Council is holding electronic meetings. Your testimony should address the matter being considered at the time. When testifying, please state your name for the record. Your address is not necessary. Please disclose if you are a lobbyist. If you're representing an organization, please identify it. The presiding officer determines the length of testimony. Individuals generally have 3 minutes to testify unless otherwise stated. When your time is up, the presiding officer will ask you to conclude. Disruptive conduct such as shouting, refusing to conclude your testimony when your time is up, or interrupting others' testimony or council deliberations will not be allowed. If there are disruptions, a warning will be given that further disruption will result in the person being placed on hold or ejected from the remainder of the electronic meeting. Please be aware that all council meetings are recorded. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen. So first up is communications. Keelan, if you could read the first individual's name, item 448, please.
Request of Liliana McDonald to address council regarding domestic violence services for African Americans.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Liliana McDonald, and I work for Bradley Engel as the housing coordinator. So I just wanted to say that because of COVID, a lot of services have been diminished, like in the community. And Bradley Engel is the only culturally specific domestic violence provider for Black survivors in Multnomah County. You know, Black survivors don't trust the system because it hasn't been fair and equitable. They stay in homes where they are not safe and their children are not safe because they have nowhere to go. And Bradley Engel wants to be able to answer the call, like when they call for help. And we want them to know that they've come to the right place and that we can help them. And I think what I wanted to do was to ask, and I don't know if you guys have the power to do this, but I was going to ask if the council would fund 3 full-time culturally specific domestic violence advocates for Bradley Engel. And I would say that this has to be specific because dollars get lost and Black people get grouped in with everyone else. And in the end, we're at the bottom searching for the crumbs. We at Bradley Engel, we provide culturally specific housing services. So survivors come to us when they're wanting to flee domestic violence. And you know, when the COVID dollars came out, that was, you know, nice and everything. And we were able to reach a lot of people. But the second time it came out, we weren't able to assist people because we didn't have anybody to do the work. So the money was there, but there wasn't anybody there to do the work. And so, and also we need not just like one-time assistance, we need ongoing assistance. So that's what I was asking for. But when they come to Bradley Engel, you know, we meet them, they get to meet somebody that looks like them, knows where they come from, understands the barriers that they might face. And we provide wraparound services that are culturally specific as well. We just started a new program for the children of the survivors that we serve. And, you know, I know that the city's been real hot and there's a lot of gun violence and stuff happening. And I wanted to say that, you know, violence is all connected, right? And so it's really important when mothers and heads of households are seeking safety that somebody's there to provide that. And we do that at Bradley Engel. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. We appreciate your being here. Commissioner Hardesty.
Lily and I also want to thank you for
Good morning.
Good morning. I also want to thank you for being here and thank you very much for your powerful testimony this morning. You may know that I am the co-chair of the Gateway Domestic Violence Center with Chair Deborah Kafori. And I will say, I'm sorry, not with Chair Deborah Kafori, with Commissioner Jalapal. And let me just say that she and I are absolutely committed to ensuring that people who are escaping domestic violence get the support that they need. The city of Portland does not fund social services. That is a sole role of Multnomah County. But I would be happy to work with you and have you come to the Gateway Domestic Violence Committee meeting and actually make your case for why you need this kind of support. And I will be there advocating right next to you. I know that during COVID, domestic violence calls have been up between 100 and 300% a week. I also know that people are staying longer with their abusers during COVID because there were no options of being able to safely leave with their kids. And so I know the folks who've been doing the kind of work you do, Lillian, have been overstressed by all the crises that we have experienced over the last year. And I just want to say thank you. And I hear you. And I am going to stand next to you to help you advocate at the right door for the supports that you need. I think the Joint Office should also be making sure that they are providing the supports so that as women come to you seeking shelter, that there's a safe place that the Joint Office is making available. And I don't know how involved they have been in actually helping you provide those wraparound services. So we have work to do to make sure that we're living up to who we say we think we are. And again, thank you for being here. And I will work with you to make sure that you're asked. And do you have a dollar amount with that ask?
I'm sure my executive director does. She's going next.
Oh, she's on next. Oh, good. All right. Then I will ask the appropriate person that question. I know she will have that. Thank you so much again for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 449, please. Next individual, Keelan.
Request of Bree Condon to address council regarding the macro importance of continuing to direct funds to domestic violence work. And we received a request from Bree that they were canceling their request to address council.
Very good. Then we'll get that information if Liliana can get that information directly to Commissioner Hardesty, then you can connect later. Item 450, next individual, please.
Request of Matt Glazewski to address council regarding city climate priorities.
Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Matt Glazewski, North Portland. I want to speak briefly to you this morning about something you have all committed to work on, which is climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. When you all first met earlier this year as a new council to discuss your council priorities for the year, I thought it was a terrific idea. However, during these sessions, not one of you acknowledged that climate change should be one of your priorities for the year, despite the fact that there is literally an emergency declaration on the books in our city as resolved by the City Council. Climate change isn't taking a break while we deal with the other major issues facing our city right now. Mayor Wheeler, sir, you approved of an amendment way back when that I suggested during the energy ordinance hearing in 2017. You may remember. That amendment added the impact statement section on the staff summaries relating to the renewable energy goals that were set by the City Council. Yet as City Hall staff myself, I saw with my own eyes how little analysis or thought was ever put into that statement box by most city staff. And in the short time I have today, I want to give some examples of how the everyday business brought before this council has not been vetted with a true climate lens. Commissioner Ryan, sir, housing is very important. We all agree there, and you've done great work so far. But sir, I beg you to help enhance the development of new housing to ensure that it is climate resilient. There is a city charter amendment that prohibits weatherization of housing. It's literally in the city charter, which is ridiculous. And while our current housing crisis is most severe, it will not be long before more climate migrants begin to push into our city and region. That housing crisis will be far worse, and it is much closer than you realize. All you have to do is look at the droughts to the south. Commissioner Rubio, who's not here, hopefully her staff will relay this. The healthy climate fee needs to live on. Otherwise, people have no incentive to decarbonize their operations. Taking a page from Multnomah County's book is a good idea by beginning to ban natural gas infrastructure in all public buildings. BPS has good people working on the climate action plan, but they have no influence over the other bureaus to actually meet the goals. Commissioner Hardesty, an electric fire truck will not make PF&R's carbon footprint smaller. The truck is made from newly mined metal, powered by lithium batteries, whose ore was taken from the earth in poor places like Bolivia. Look into refurbishing the existing fleet to run on renewable fuels sourced locally before we spend $850,000 of taxpayer money for each new fire truck. That company is doing something that we call greenwashing. And ask Derek to call me if you want to know more. And also, please, Commissioner, follow up on your promise to close more streets to traffic. We are losing our window to do this as we come out of the pandemic. Commissioner Maps, BES is a renewable CNG program spooling up at Columbia Boulevard. Use this opportunity to look at how we can power more of the city fleet with that fuel, like Commissioner Hardesty's fire trucks. Mayor Wheeler, you were the only person during the fire truck hearing to say we need to be looking at general efficiencies internally as well. You're so right, sir. Use your office to create a climate czar that will lead this effort for the whole city. Partner with your seatmates on this nonpartisan issue. Remain true to the climate emergency declaration. Climate change is an economic issue. Climate change is a health issue. Climate change is an immigration issue. Climate change is an education issue. Climate change is a gender issue. Climate change is a human rights issue. It is the issue. Thank you.
Well, Matt, first of all, you got a lot in and you did it in exactly 3 minutes. Thank you. And I was taking notes as quickly as I possibly could. That was great testimony, and you're right to hold us accountable. Thank you. Commissioner Hardesty.
That was not 30 minutes, Mayor. Do not encourage that.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, 3 minutes. If I said 30.
I know Commissioner Hardesty likes people to keep to the 3 minutes, so I did my best for her.
And Matt, you know, I appreciate you. You should push us to do better. I just want you to know that we had this conversation about where climate change fit into our priorities. And as a council, we agreed that every area that we listed as a priority has a climate mitigation strategy attached to it. So I want you to know, and I want to say this clearly, that I had asked the same question. Why didn't we start with climate change? And the response that I got from my colleagues was that everything that we do is about climate mitigation and racial inequality, eliminating racial inequality. Those are the two top priorities, at least on my agenda. And I will say from all of my colleagues in the conversations, all of us are committed to climate mitigation. We don't have time to not be. And We're going to try a lot of stuff. Some of it will work, some won't. But guess what? We know that diesel fuels don't work, and we've got to do better. Thank you for being here, Matt.
Thank you, Commissioner. And if I may offer a suggestion, I know that you're very passionate about contracting equity, of course, and I agree with that. I would offer a challenge to any members of the council to emphasize. Whoops, someone else is chatting. Emphasize that question whenever anything comes up before council, and say that how is this affecting climate change? Ask that question of city staff, because the more they hear it from you, their leaders, the more they will begin to think about it critically.
Great point. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. We appreciate your testimony. Next individual, Keelan, item 451, please.
Mayor, Bree Condon, item 449, has joined us. Would you like to go back to 449?
Yes, yeah, go back to 449, please.
Thank you. Request of Bree Condon to address council regarding the macro importance of continuing to direct funds to domestic violence work.
Good morning. Commissioner Hardesty, do you have your hand up? No, okay. Good morning, Bree.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners. Sorry I'm late. We had a van break-in for our cargo van, and so I was working with our office manager this morning on that, but I am here. Apologies for keeping everyone waiting. Thank you for passing the mic, Liliana. I'm glad that you all got to hear from Liliana this morning. I wanted to just address, and I have some follow-up answers also, Commissioner Hardy. You had asked for a dollar figure. It's about $91,000 for a single full-time position that offers full-time benefits, healthcare, and retirement for our staff. That would be ×3 for what Liliana was requesting earlier this morning. I think that it's important to just raise awareness that the history in Portland, and this isn't strictly for you, Mayor, this is just in general for decades. We've had inadequate policy. We've had some uninformed policy, inequitable policy. And when that happens, nonprofit services providers, we step in and we cover the gap. And those gaps, if we have informed policy moving forward that centers and prioritizes race and marginalized populations, we will be able to offer extended services in nonprofit, and the critical abilities that our team and members of our staff that work with Liliana are able to extend to domestic violence survivors can be handled in an efficient way and a sustainable manner. And I think that's really important to just address why we all, no matter what city, state, or county we are talking from, we are advocating that services are delivered in nonprofit agencies that are supported by funders. So we can't just keep hoping and praying that those dollar checks come in and that eventually that's going to add up to enough of a salary for Liliana to have a teammate, another one in place, because of some issues with policy in the past. And because of this, it's actually our responsibility to do this better and to do this different. And in her ask, Liliana works a lot. She runs a team of a total of 4 people, 3 housing advocates, and they are buried in work. And with the pandemic, my background's in risk management. It is not acceptable in society today to meet a crisis by serving someone while you are in crisis also. It is acceptable to hold a safe container that's grounded and to be able to offer these services that we have removed from certain classes of people, certain colors of people in our policy creation. So the need to sustain 501c3 nonprofits as we work overtime, everyone on our team, is critical. And I appreciate people on this call today taking that and holding that in mind while we work in multiple departments across multiple agencies in the city to do this better, because that's what we're tasked with. And that's the only option that we have, is to do this better. Thank you for everyone's time. Apologies for being late.
Thank you. No problem. We're sorry to hear about the van.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hardesty.
I was going to say no apology necessary. And yes, I'm glad that the van issue has been resolved. Bree, you are absolutely right on time. And I am so grateful that in spite of everything else that's going on, we were able to get your voice into the public record today. I look forward to working with you and your team and with the Gateway Domestic Violence Center leadership to make sure that we are uplifting the incredible work that you're doing on with so many multiple crises taking place simultaneously. You are a treasure. I'm looking forward to getting to know you and figuring out how I can be ongoing support for what is really, really difficult, heartfelt work. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Hardesty. 451, please.
Request of Anna Johns to address council regarding public safety. It looks like Anna hasn't joined us yet.
All right, 452, please. Next individual.
Request of Megan Doughty to address council regarding the inequitable impact and administrative burdens created by Portland's new rental laws.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hello, my name is Megan Doughty. I am a professor of public administration and public policy at a local university in Washington. I am also a lifelong resident of Portland, Oregon. So I want to thank you for the council's time and consideration. This is addressed in particular to Councilman Ryan or Commissioner Ryan. So I support the intent of helping marginalized communities and those who the rental regulations have normally discriminated against. But the equality rather than equity approach of first come, first serve has deep unintended implementation consequences that are hurting those that the regulations were intended to help. The 72-hour and first come, first serve mean that unless you have a job where you can sit on the computer, you will miss out on all rental opportunities posted during working hours due to the 72-hour requirement. For example, my fiance works an hourly job out in the field doing environmental restoration. He could not apply for a single one of the rentals that we did. Additionally, and I did all of our rental applications because I'm lucky enough to have that kind of job. Additionally, because we were applying together, we got penalized because those sort of applications must be united on online applications. So if you are two people applying, you get penalized and pushed down because both your applications have to be in before they can count as a complete application. Additionally, we sent out over $200 in rental application fees, the majority of which of those were returned, but not all of them were. And I don't have so much money floating around that this was not a burden to have that much cash frozen at a time when I was also trying to wind up everything with my previous rental. In administrative policy, which is what I study, we have this concept called administrative burden. And there are three aspects: learning, compliance, and psychological. What we have here is the unintended compliance costs of this particular policy. It is not working. It is hurting those who it was meant to help because it is easiest for those who have a white collar job to apply for these rentals. Whereas if you have an hourly job or anything that might cause you not to be able to live on your computer, you are going to have so much more trouble and miss out on so many applications. So the solution to this, as I see it, you have three options. The longer option, and the one with more of an outreach, is to partner with one of your wonderful local universities and study if what I'm saying is true. Is this actually having an equitable effect on those who are applying? The shorter and I think easier solution would be to revisit the implementation guidance you're giving rental applications and companies and help find solutions to minimize these burdens. It could be a simple IT fix to help these achieve what they are intended to. Or the council can do nothing as affordable housing slips out of more and more residents' reach and the homelessness crisis continues to get worse. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, appreciate it. Keelan, does that complete communications this morning?
Yes, it does.
Very good. To the consent agenda, have any items been pulled off the consent agenda? Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Ryan has a comment.
No, I was late. Sorry about that. I just wanted to let Megan know that we'll be in touch with her. It's often the case, or it's not often, it happens a lot when you pass really good policy, where when it's implemented, there's kinks and you got to work them out. So her testimony was very helpful and our office will be in touch with her. Thanks.
Great. Megan, did you catch that? Hopefully she's still on. Either way, you'll reach out.
You know what you want by what you do. We'll follow up. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Excuse me, Mayor. Commissioner Ryan, to that point, there's an application called One App that the mayor has some knowledge of. Early on, the city was looking at whether or not to use that actually allows people to apply once and get a list of apartments that they qualify for. It sounds like it would be cheaper for the city to actually figure out how to provide access to One App, because I actually think the protections that we put in place absolutely benefit renters. And I don't want to start tinkering with a system that at this moment, when the eviction moratorium is about to expire, this is not the time to be tinkering with that. But I think maybe reaching out to, I can't believe I'm blanking on the gentleman's name. Mayor, do you remember his name?
I don't off the top of my head, Commissioner.
I'm blanking on it at the moment, but it'll come back to me. I'm having a senior moment. But you should have a conversation with him. I think it will be very enlightening, and it might be helpful, Commissioner Ryan, as you're thinking about how do we support folks being able to keep a roof over their head as we recover.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. I'll look into that. Thanks.
Very good. Does that complete our communications?
Yes, Mayor, it does.
All right. Have any items been pulled off of the consent agenda?
No, we've received no requests.
All right. Very good. Please call the roll on the consent agenda.
Ryan,
Yes, I just wanted to call out Gustavo Cruz, who's rejoining the board, and also William Myers for Prosper Portland. I just want to acknowledge their service. I vote aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye, and the consent agenda is adopted. Next to the, let's see, make sure we don't have any time certain. R45, 453, please.
adopt the supplemental budget for the FY 2020-21 over expenditure process and make budget adjustments in various funds.
Colleagues, before us, we have the Over Expenditure Ordinance, also known as the OEO. The OEO is very narrowly focused on preventing over expenditure at the Bureau, fund, or appropriation level. As usual, there's also a companion ordinance authorizing a temporary operating loan to prevent temporary negative cash balances at the end of the fiscal year. This morning, Budget Director Jessica Kennard will walk us through the current OEO ordinance, and we will consider any amendments, take testimony, and then hold a vote on the OEO. We will then have our city's treasurer, Bridget O'Callahan, provide an overview of the loan ordinance before considering and voting upon that particular item. I'll now turn it over to Director Kennard to review the OEO. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, members of the council. My name is Jessica Kennard. I'm the city's budget director, and I'm here virtually with Michelle Rubin and Robert Cheney, who are our budget monitoring process coordinators. Robert, could you pull up the slideshow, please? Thank you. And go ahead and go to the next slide. So today before you, as the mayor mentioned, there are two items that are part of the final budget monitoring process of this fiscal year. The first is the Overexpenditure Ordinance, or OEO, and I will briefly review the purpose of the OEO and highlight some of the changes that are included as filed. Please feel free to ask questions at any time during this overview. We will then have time for discussion, hear amendments, take public testimony, and have final voting. And as the mayor mentioned, we'll then consider a related ordinance that authorizes a one-day loan in the city's grants fund to ensure we don't end the fiscal year with a negative balance in that fund. Next slide, please. The Overexpenditure Ordinance, or OEO, is our third and final supplemental budget process, or bump, of the fiscal year. We complete this ordinance at the very end of the fiscal year to ensure that expenses do not exceed current budgeted appropriations. The OEO is different from the fall and spring bump processes in that it is shorter and more narrowly focused, which typically does not include a council work session. This chart shows that the fall and spring bump often take place over a 2-month or more timeframe, while the OEO is typically conducted with bureaus in just over 2 to 3 weeks. Next slide, please. Again, as we've mentioned, the OEO is typically narrowly focused on technical true-ups and ending the year in balance. As a result, only bureaus that are making changes that are required to submit materials to the city budget office. So not everyone submits materials. Because of the late timing in the fiscal year, general fund contingency resources are typically only allocated for technical true-ups or to prevent year-end overexpenditure in bureaus. Any resources that are allocated in the general fund would need to be spent or encumbered by June 30th, as we begin with our new budget that you all just adopted last week on July 1st. Next slide, please. While primarily technical in nature, there are several budgetary changes that are occurring in the OEO. In total, across all funds, the OEO increases the city's current appropriations by $85.1 million. In the slide, I briefly highlight some of the general fund changes. There is one request for new resources, which would allocate $3,351 in general fund contingency resources for a true-up of the city's payment to Metro for Portland 5's operations. This is required under the terms of the intergovernmental agreement. There is a net change of about $616,000 in general fund revenue in the OEO as filed. This is primarily due to a $500,000 increase in intergovernmental revenues in Portland Fire and Rescue's general fund budget, which is funding that's coming from Multnomah County for their vaccination efforts. The budget also includes $108,473 in charges for services within the Portland Parks and Recreation Bureau, primarily for tennis center and parking fees, which is being reinvested in maintenance activities such as tennis court resurfacing. The Parks Bureau and the Housing Bureau are both making transfers out of their general fund into other funds to preserve funding for key expenses. Parks Bureau is transferring funding for in-process fleet purchases, and the Housing Bureau is transferring funding to the Housing Investment Fund for supportive housing risk mitigation pool funding. Additionally, several bureaus in the general fund are moving budgeted funds between different types of spending categories to better reflect anticipated actual expenses. Next slide, please. There are some large dollar value changes in non-general fund bureaus, which reflect recognizing and truing up the budget to actual revenues and projected expenditures. The Water Bureau is recognizing $76.7 million in bond and note proceeds, aligning with their May 2021 bond sale and refunding. And the Bureau of Environmental Services is truing up what had been a conservatively forecast revenue picture to account for $4 million in above budgeted system development charge revenues. The Office of Management and Finance is drawing upon non-general fund contingency accounts to conservatively ensure that we end the fiscal year in balance in the Insurance and Claims Fund and the City Fleet Operating Fund. And then the Facilities Operating Fund is recognizing a little over $400,000 in increased interagency revenue, which is being appropriated to external materials and services in the Facilities Operating Fund contingency account. Next slide, please. Within the Office of Community and Civic Life, the Bureau is recognizing beginning fund balance in the Recreational Cannabis Tax Fund. There's also a small accounting true-up of cannabis fund resources in the Housing Bureau. Also in the Housing Bureau, there are a number of changes in allocations of grant funding and other non-general fund resources that true up to actual and projected project and program spending across fiscal years. Finally, the Bureau of Transportation is drawing upon contingency resources primarily to support the one-day loan that you will authorize following this legislation. And they're also drawing upon contingency to protect against overexpenditure in managing of a multi-year contract. Next slide, please. The second item you'll consider today, it's related to the Overexpenditure Ordinance again, is the one-day loan. The city's treasurer, Bridget O'Callaghan, will be available to speak to this when it's time to consider that item. For now, as it relates to budget changes, I'd just highlight that this is a technical ordinance that's brought every year to address the particular nature of the grants fund as a reimbursement fund. Because expenses happen before the reimbursement of revenue, the fund consistently runs a negative balance, and state budget law and generally accepted accounting principles do not allow for negative ending balances. So this is why we authorize a one-day loan from bureaus with grant expenses to make sure we end the year with a positive balance. Next slide. That concludes my overview. Are there any questions at this time? Great, seeing none, I will turn it back over to the mayor. And
sorry, my screen kept moving around on me. Keelan, could you also read 454?
Authorize temporary operating loans between various funds to provide interim funding to cover lags in federal, state, and other grant reimbursements and other negative cash and fund balances.
Thank you. Since we're doing the presentations together, we might as well read them both. Colleagues, if there are any amendments that council would like to propose to the over expenditure ordinance, we'll now hear in second any amendments that anybody has. Any amendments? Seeing none. Keelan, do we have any public testimony for the OEO?
No one signed up for this item.
Very good. Please call the roll on 453.
Ryan,
Yes, thank you, Bureau Leadership and Director Kennard. I vote aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Max,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye, the ordinance is adopted and the OEO is authorized. Next, we'll go to the loan ordinance review. Treasurer O'Callahan, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Bridget O'Callahan, and I'm the city's treasurer. Also joining me today is Sheila Craig. Sheila is the Bureau of Revenue and Finance Grants Division Manager. She will be available to answer any questions that you may have about the loan request. The purpose of this legislation, as referenced earlier, is to authorize 2 temporary interfund loans to the city's grant funds, one loan of approximately $25 million from the Transportation Operating Fund, and another loan of approximately $5 million from the General Reserve Fund. The total is not to exceed $30 million for both loans. As Director Kennard mentioned, this is somewhat of a routine fiscal year-end transaction, and that it's necessary for the city to remain in compliance with state budget law. It requires that we not have a negative fund balance at the end of a fiscal year. So just some background information. The Bureau of Revenue and Finance Grants Division is responsible for managing the Grants Fund, the Home Fund, and the Community Development Block Grant Fund. These are reimbursement funds, meaning that expenditures for each fund are expected to be reimbursed by entities outside the city of Portland. Typically those would be federal, state, and other grant programs. The nature of this creates a lag between expenses and revenues for the grants funds, and this can result in temporary negative balances. So we find it necessary to have this one-day interfund loan between these programs, typically over the year end, so that we remain in compliance with local budget law and also generally accepted accounting practices. While the ordinance authorizes a loan for up to $30 million, not to exceed $30 million. This is a considerably conservative estimate. We expect the actual amount to be much lower than this. Repayment sources for the loans, of course, are the reserve funds, the grant receivables, and the tax payments associated with the grants programs. With that, I request approval of the ordinance and thank you. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Colleagues, any questions for Bridget? Seeing none, at this point, I would ask if anyone has any amendments to the loan ordinance. I don't see that. Keelan, any public testimony on the loan ordinance?
no, Mayor.
Very good. Please call the roll.
Ryan,
Thank you, Bridget. That was crystal clear. I vote aye.
Hardesty,
Aye.
Maps,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Hi, thanks, Treasurer O'Callahan. We appreciate it. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
With that, thank you, Director Kennard, as well. With that, we'll move on to the regular agenda. First item on the regular agenda is item 463.
proclaim June 19, 2021 to be Juneteenth.
Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our guest speakers, Janelle Jack and Heather Baker from Juneteenth Oregon. Janelle Jack is the Executive Director of Juneteenth Oregon, and she's also the granddaughter of Mrs. Clara Peoples, a name that is probably familiar to many of us here at City Hall. Her work led to Juneteenth being recognized here at both the city as well as at the state. Along with Janelle, Heather Baker is part of the leadership at Juneteenth Oregon and has been a truly tireless advocate for celebrating Juneteenth and what it stands for. So I want to welcome Janelle and Heather. I want to thank you, Janelle and Heather and Juneteenth Oregon, for your incredible work and your advocacy around Juneteenth. It's long overdue in Oregon, and it's appropriate that in Oregon and Portland we properly commemorate the holiday both now and into the future. I'm keeping my remarks fairly short today, but before I finish speaking, let me just make one more plug here. And you'll hear this again for the 49th annual Juneteenth Oregon event. It's live streaming from the Jack London Review. Juneteenth Oregon will feature live performances by local musicians, as well as special appearances such as figures such as Governor Brown and United States Senator Jeff Merkley. The live stream starts at 1 p.m. this Saturday, June 19th, and you can watch online at juneteenthor.com, so that's juneteenthor.com, or pdxjazz.com. Thank you all for those of you who are here today. And with that, we will, late breaking news. Yesterday, the United States Senate unanimously passed a measure that would establish a federal holiday for Juneteenth. The bill is now headed to the House, where I think all of us hope it will pass. The council clerk's office has on record the updated language in the proclamation that I will read shortly. And with that, we will hear from our guests. Good morning.
Good morning. First of all, I'd like to apologize. Janelle Jack was unable to attend this call, so I am standing in the gap for her. I am Heather Coleman Cox. You have my former name, Mayor, but I'm the Media Relations Director for Juneteenth Oregon. I'm very pleased to be here in front of you, Mayor and members of Council. And as you all know, Juneteenth is a celebration of the emancipation of slaves in the opposing states. It wasn't until the 13th Amendment that all slaves were free in America. And we celebrate Juneteenth here in Oregon we start with a freedom parade honoring the mother of Juneteenth, Miss Clara Peoples. And then we have a community event in a location that we are constantly looking for each year to hold our event. So our ask today of the council is that you please consider funding a permit for us to hold our celebration, our annual celebration, on a portion of the waterfront, as well as fund a permit for our parade. As the mayor indicated, the Senate did pass the bill yesterday, and we are ecstatically excited about it. We are confident that it will pass the House and make it to President Biden's desk for signature, and that the entire country will recognize Juneteenth as a federal holiday next year. So we would like to expand our celebration in Portland to incorporate a large space that we can count on every single year, as well as a parade permit to allow our parade every single year. Thank you.
Thank you, Janelle. We really appreciate you being here. At this time, I'll ask our commissioners if they have remarks that they would like to add. Commissioner Mapps. You're muted, sir.
Thank you. I want to encourage Juneteenth Oregon to reach out to my office. I don't know about the details of paying for the permits, but we'll certainly would love to work with you to make progress on that important issue. And also thank you so much for your work on Juneteenth here in Oregon. The other thing that I'd like to say, Mr. Mayor and colleagues, is that I am delighted to join you in proclaiming June 19th 2021 to be Juneteenth. The word Juneteenth is a mashup of two words, June and 19th. Juneteenth commemorates June 19, 1865. That is the day when Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, and read a proclamation, General Order Number 3, which began with these words. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. In other words, Juneteenth commemorates the day when Black Texans learned that the Civil War was over and slavery had come to an end. Now, you might notice something odd about the timing of this announcement. Juneteenth commemorates June 19, 1865, but most Americans think slavery ended 2 years earlier, on January 1, 1863, when Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Those dates are a reminder that slavery did not end overnight. Instead, slavery receded slowly at different times and in different places. The Emancipation Proclamation of 1863 declared slavery to be illegal in the Confederate States. Of course, at that time, those states were in open rebellion against our federal government. So the Emancipation Proclamation did not free slaves. Instead, it clarified the purpose and the promise of the Civil War. With the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln made it clear that the point of the Civil War was to end slavery in these United States. However, in the real world, slavery receded slowly and unevenly over time, almost county by county. For Black Texans, slavery did not end until 2 months after the end of the Civil War. That is the day that we know as Juneteenth. Juneteenth has been celebrated in some form in some communities since 1865. These days, Juneteenth is often celebrated through parades and barbecues, and by recommitting ourselves to the work of ending race-based exploitation in these United States. Juneteenth is also a day tinged with sorrow. Juneteenth is both a liberation story and a story about justice delayed. For me, this tension is the defining characteristic of Juneteenth. Juneteenth is not just an opportunity to celebrate Black liberation, it is also a reminder that the work of dismantling racial exploitation continues to this day. And Mr. Mayor, colleagues, on this day, we would be remiss if we did not recognize and remember Clara Peoples for her role in establishing Juneteenth here in Oregon. Now, Clara Peoples died back in 2015, but the old timers in this room will remember her. She was a beloved community member and educator, and she is the undisputed mother of Juneteenth here in Oregon. In Oregon, the celebration of Juneteenth began in 1945, when Clara Peoples, a Black woman from Oklahoma who worked at the Vanport shipyards, noticed that her co-workers did not celebrate Juneteenth. So Ms. Peoples asked her boss if she and her co-workers could celebrate Juneteenth on their break. Years later, in 1972, Ms. Peoples helped organize Portland's first annual Juneteenth celebration. Portland has celebrated Juneteenth ever since. For me, it is truly an honor to play a small role in continuing the Juneteenth tradition Ms. Peoples started in Oregon. That is why I'd like to take this moment to call on all Portlanders to observe Juneteenth. And on this Juneteenth, please take a moment to both celebrate Black liberation and please take a moment to recommit yourselves to ending racial discrimination in the City of Roses. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Commissioner Mapps, I'm annoyed at you because you actually did such a thorough job of putting the entire history out. I want to start by just really appreciating Miss Janelle Black. Janelle Black, your grandmother would be so, so proud of you, of the strong woman you are, of your vision of moving her work forward. One of the first people I met when I moved to Portland, January 1st, 1990, was your grandmother. And you know what she did when she saw me? She opened her arms wide, had never seen me before in her life. Come here, baby, give me a hug. And that's how I was introduced to your grandmother. So I just want you to know that I honor her, and I honor you and the legacy that you are continuing. So I just want to make this about just remembering that heavy black coat that she wore, whether it was hot or not. And I didn't know why, and I never asked, right? But I just want you to know that she made me feel like I was in my grandmother's arms and I was safe. And whatever silly idea I had, oh, baby, that's a good idea. So I applaud you. I applaud you continuing this legacy. And I want to challenge you. You gave us here at City Hall a good challenge. But if you've been paying attention over the last year, right, there are a lot of businesses in Portland that have taken up the fight about creating a more racially just city. I think you should be having conversations with the Portland Business Alliance, with chambers of commerces of all stripes. I think what you have asked for is something that you could get a lot of support behind, because you will be just asking people to live up to their words and to keep the commitment they made to centering Black voices and ensuring that we are undoing the harm that historic policies have done. And so you are a reminder that, we can't get tired of continuing this fight. Your grandmother didn't get tired. She kept going, and she has you now to continue to keep going. You are asking the right questions. You are asking for the right support. And I think you just have to broaden your audience. People think we have like bucket loads of money at the city. And as you may have heard earlier, we actually have to balance our books, right? So, but it doesn't mean that we can't highlight the excellent work that your family has done to bring this historic recognition long before the rest of the country was actually even talking about Juneteenth. So you are a good lesson for young people that we don't get the change we want overnight. Sometimes it takes decades, and sometimes it takes passing the work on to the next generation. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for continuing your grandmother's spirit.
Thank you for your kind remarks, Commissioner Hardesty and MAPS.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for being here, Heather Coleman-Cox. I really appreciated your testimony and your statements. And we will all work together with PBOT for permits, and also maybe perhaps with parks to make sure that that's something ongoing that is easy. And we'll work with you on that. Anyway, I want to just take a moment to really pause and reflect with my colleagues. And yes, thank you, Commissioner Maps, for just laying out the history so well. I've grown to really appreciate and value hearing your proclamations. But I want to just take a moment as an ally to reflect on Juneteenth and the Black experience. Since emancipation, as was stated over 150 years ago, restrictive and punitive laws centered on upholding white supremacy seek to strip Black Americans of their rights. Historically, what I always would notice was the right to vote. And so I want to reflect on that today, because the current efforts to disenfranchise Black Americans and people of color are an omen and an eerie echo of our country's patterns. The right to vote is everything in democracy, and it's how we influence those empowered to protect us and our access to opportunity and prosperity. Since May 2021, yes, just in the last 6 weeks, state lawmakers have enacted 22 laws in 14 states that restrict ballot access, making it harder to vote by absentee, by mail, with strict ID requirements. Many among many of the restrictive provisions. We can't look at this historic issue of voter suppression as just one more horrible thing that's happening. This horrible thing is intentional. When we can't vote for anything from federal elections to your local school board. Intentional voter suppression laws are about silencing Black people, people of color, immigrants, low-income people. And we cannot simply stand by on this injustice. We've learned to think of Juneteenth as Emancipation Day. And in this moment in time, there are still more freedoms that we need to protect for Black Americans and people of color, more laws that need to be corrected for the true inclusion and prosperity of Black Americans. Is more to be achieved, and so much more space for change, healing, and growth. I sit with all of my colleagues in the city today and in reflection, and to take action to make change happen for a more just and whole society. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Ryan. And with that, I have the honor of reading the proclamation on behalf of the City Council. Commissioner Ryan, did you have another comment? No, very good. I have the honor.
I forgot to lower my hand.
No worries. The proclamation on behalf of Portland City Council. Whereas the first enslaved people brought over from Africa to the continental United States arrived in what is now Winyah Bay, South Carolina in 1526. And whereas slavery became an economic driver in the United States, by 1860, 1 in 8 Americans were enslaved African Americans, forcefully building this country's economy and infrastructure while sacrificing their bodies, families, cultures, and lives. And whereas on January 1st, 1863, President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, setting in motion the end of slavery in the United States. And whereas this news reached Texas on June 19th, 1865, when Union Army General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston Bay with Union troops announcing the people of Texas are informed that, in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. And whereas the celebration of the end of slavery, which became known as Juneteenth, being the oldest known celebration of the end of slavery in the United States. And whereas Juneteenth commemorates African American freedom and achievement, celebrating the fundamental truth that all people are created equal, while encouraging continuous self-development and respect for all cultures. And whereas across our nation, states, counties, and cities, the celebration of Juneteenth reminds us each of the precious promises of freedom, equality, and opportunity, which are the core of the American dream. And whereas in 1997, the United States Congress passed Senate Joint Resolution 11 and House Joint Resolution 56, officially recognizing Juneteenth Independence Day. However, Juneteenth is not recognized as a federal holiday. We call on the federal government to rectify this and enact legislation that would officially recognize Juneteenth as a federal holiday. And whereas in 2021, the Oregon Legislative Assembly recognized Juneteenth as a state holiday. And whereas this year, Juneteenth carries even more resonance as people across Oregon, the United States, and around the world are still facing systemic racism, proclaiming that Black lives matter, and in order for all lives to matter, Black lives have to matter too. And whereas recognizing the social, economic, and racial disparities still in place more than 150 years after the end of slavery, we call on the federal government to pass reparations legislation. Now, therefore, I, Ted Wheeler, Mayor of the City of Portland, Oregon, the City of Roses, do hereby proclaim June 19th, 2021 to be Juneteenth in Portland and encourage all residents to observe this day. Thank you.
Mayor.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your testimony. Colleagues, thank you for your heartfelt remarks. Keelan, the next item is 464 on the regular agenda.
Ratify a letter of agreement within the Seasonal Maintenance Workers Collective Bargaining Agreement to reflect the Janus Supreme Court decision requiring employees to consent to having union dues taken out of their paycheck.
Colleagues, in 2018, the United States Supreme Court ruled that public sector union represented employees would no longer have union dues automatically deducted from their pay. Instead, they ruled that employees must give affirmative consent to have dues automatically deducted from their pay. This ordinance changes language within the Seasonal Maintenance Worker Collective Bargaining Agreement to align our practices with the Supreme Court ruling. I'd like to offer an amendment to the ordinance. In paragraph 4, I would like to amend the first sentence as follows, quote, in negotiations in 2018, the city and the union agreed to a cost of living increase, but did not know which consumer price index CPI to use, unquote. The rest of the paragraph remains the same. Can I get a second, please?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Hardesty. We'll keep that amendment on the table. With that, Labor Relations Coordinator Jamal Anthony is here to present the ordinance. Welcome, Jamal. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Council. It's great to see you all again. I apologize for not having something as glamorous as and impactful as the Juneteenth proclamation. But what I present to you today is extremely cosmetic, and the mayor went over it. What we're presenting to you is something that came out of our 2018 negotiations. Shortly after we reached an agreement, there was a Supreme Court decision, and we had to amend the contract where dues automatically came out of an employee's check. In case there's any questions as to why we're just now getting around to this in 2021. In 2019, there were some layoffs in the Bureau that Local Laborers 43 wanted to give their attention to that rather than this. And then in 2020, we didn't bring any seasonal maintenance workers on board because we were dealing with COVID. And again, local laborers and labor relations had a handshake agreement that we would deal with this at a more appropriate time. So this LOA is more to reflect the practice that is in place at the time.
Thank you. Commissioner Mapps has a question. Jamal.
Not a problem.
Can I get some background on the mayor's amendment? Where'd that come from?
That's on me.
Okay.
That's on me. I hadn't used the electronic filing system, and I had before. And in haste, there were some people from their office telling me to provide some comments, and I had just put a typo in there. I had said that we did not know something that we did know. And yesterday, just for procedure, they asked that the mayor would start off and edit that. But that's on me. The mayor's doing me a solid. I appreciate that.
No problem at all. My office is still learning the system too.
Not a problem.
If those are the worst typos you can come up with, Jamal, you're doing just fine. Are there any further questions? If not, Keelan, is there public testimony on this item?
No one is on the call for this item.
Very good. I don't see any further questions. Please call the roll on the amendment.
Ryan.
Jamal, humility is such a refreshing leadership trait. Thank you. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Mapps.
Aye.
Wheeler.
I wish all such small problems were so easily solved. Thank you, Jamal, for your great work on this. I'm happy to vote aye. The amendment's adopted to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion? It's an emergency ordinance. Please call the roll.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
I really appreciate the fact that we were thoughtful and we worked together to do it at a time where people weren't stressed about other issues that were impacting the conversation. So excellent work as always, Jamal. I vote aye.
Mapps.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Happy to vote aye. The ordinance is approved as amended. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Next up, 465.
Temporarily modify and waive portions of city code titles original art murals, signs, and related regulations in planning and zoning to assist businesses, organizations, and entrepreneurs to adjust and continue operations during and through the COVID-19 pandemic.
This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. Commissioner Ryan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Today, the Bureau of Development Services will present an ordinance to support businesses and help with recovery from the pandemic. As we know, the pandemic has had an adverse effect on many Portlanders and Portland's businesses. We see some storefront windows are covered in plywood, while other storefronts remain vacant as businesses have closed or shifted to work from home. Cherished restaurants have struggled to stay afloat through modified operations, while others have closed completely. And while many Portlanders have persevered, others, particularly BIPOC communities, have experienced setbacks and losses. We do appear to be seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Multnomah County is now at a low risk category for COVID-19 transmission. Work from home is shifting increasingly to a hybrid model, and people are beginning to shop and travel more. We've also seen an incredible creative response to the pandemic. Artists are installing new murals, and artwork adorns the plywood window coverings on some businesses. And throughout this time, BDS completed a rapid transition to an electronic permitting system. As we move into relief and recovery phase of this pandemic, it's crucial that we look towards solutions to support Portland's economic recovery. Today's ordinance addresses a variety of zoning code, sign code, mural code requirements identified to help with relief and recovery efforts. With that, I turn it over to BDS Land Use Services Senior Planner Matt Wickstrom for this presentation. Thanks, Matt. Please take it away. Matt, are you there? Well, this wasn't supposed to happen. He's getting on now. This just did.
That's the fun of being live. Yes, the things that aren't supposed to happen normally do.
We're all ready for Matt.
We need like a city council band that we can queue up or something when this happens.
No, we need a theme song.
Can you imagine what would it be? Yeah.
I don't want to know. I don't want to know. Matt, are you with us? We'll wait a sec. He'll be on in a minute.
Elon, have you heard from him, sir? There he is. Matt, we see your name. We see your square. We want you to unmute. There he is.
Matt, that was the best entrance I think anybody's made in the last couple of weeks.
Well, that's good. It's nice to be here today. I'm sorry, the item came on sooner than I thought. I didn't have time to change clothes or anything, so but I can begin.
Matt, you're a picture of grace under pressure. Thank you and welcome.
We'll see how long that lasts. Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to make this a full screen. Okay, I will just start by sharing my screen and then we'll.
Alrighty.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, here we go. Okay. Are you able to see my screen right now?
Not yet.
Matt, this is Keelan. We're available to help. Oh, looks like you got it.
Wait, there you go.
Is that working?
Yep. Ta-da.
Ta-da. Okay. Good afternoon, City Council and Mayor Wheeler. My name is Matt Wickstrom. I'm a senior planner for the Bureau of Development Services, and I'm here today to present an ordinance for relief and recovery for Portland businesses during and through the COVID-19 emergency. This is the second of two ordinances that we're bringing to City Council. The first was adopted by City Council back in March, and that ordinance related to safety and security measures for businesses. Are you on the next slide now?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is just some background on the COVID-19 emergency. Mayor Ted Wheeler executed a declaration of emergency on March 12th, 2020. The emergency has been extended every 2 weeks since then. The purpose of the Portland Zoning Code is to implement the comprehensive plan and land use plans in a manner that protects the health, safety, and general welfare of Portlanders. The COVID-19 emergency has had an adverse effect on the health, safety, and general welfare of Portlanders, and Portland businesses and Portlanders themselves have been negatively impacted by the COVID-19 emergency. This slide is about the approach to the ordinance. First, I'll give a presentation where I talk about the different timelines assigned to the different items in the ordinance and the reasons for those timelines, as well as then the specific items. There's actually 10 total. I've tried to group them so we can save time. These items relate to reduced and modified operations, ventilation and air circulation, non-conforming upgrades, entrepreneurs, temporary signs, and boarded up windows and murals. Following the presentation, City Council can have a discussion as well as a vote. Please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions during the presentation. There's just some details about the ordinance. It's really designed as a menu. So if City Council doesn't agree with an item, that item can be either modified or eliminated. The timelines are also adjustable, and they're based on our best knowledge and what we thought would be most appropriate. All items are temporary in the ordinance, and they all are COVID-19 related. And then the ordinance has not been filed as an emergency at this point. And the next slide has to do with the timelines in the ordinance. So there's different timelines assigned to different items. Some items are related, the timeline for those are related to the state of emergency. So once the state of emergency is no longer declared, then those items would expire. There's one item that's related to modifications proposed by the Design Overlay Zoning Map Amendment Project, and that's expected to go into effect on August 1st, 2021. So just speeding up the adoption of that item. Another item is related to obtaining either a land use review or a building permit. And so the timeline for that item is just based on a really generous amount of time to complete those processes. And then most items are related to an Oregon economic and revenue forecast from the economic office with the state of Oregon, who estimates that full recovery is estimated for the state of Oregon to occur in March 31st, 2023. Typically with BDS ordinances, they move so fast, we don't really do a great deal.
Excuse me, Matt. Excuse me, Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Commissioner, go ahead.
That's okay. Matt, when you say full recovery will be achieved by March of 2023, full recovery for who?
Full recovery only as estimated by the state of Oregon. So,
I mean, when you say full recovery, what does that mean?
that means essentially that the economy should be back and functioning in the way that it was prior to the COVID-19 emergency. So I think.
Oh, is that what we want?
Well, but perhaps not. We did want to tie it to an actual identified date, but I understand what you're getting at, Commissioner Hardesty, which is full recovery for some groups and some types of businesses probably has never occurred, or
not since 2008, the last time, right? So I don't want that to be on the record that somehow there's this expectation by March of 2023 we would have fixed it. So thank you.
Okay.
For that clarification.
Okay, point well taken. Thank you. The typically for BDS ordinances, they move really fast and there's not a great deal of outreach done. We may, if there's a house move, we may send notice to surrounding neighbors, those kinds of things. In this situation, the components of the ordinance seem to merit a greater deal of outreach and information gathering.
The action tables, we need stuff, information.
Mayor, you're not on mute, or you weren't. Thank you.
So I wouldn't typically mention city staff as outreach, but I do want to just note that we got a lot of good ideas by reaching out to city staff for issues they've identified as part of COVID. We've also shared the information and asked for additional input with the Design Review Advisory Committee, with the NAOP BOMA group. BOMA is an organization of building managers. NAOP is more of an organization of commercial developers. We've shared the components of the ordinance at the mayor's action tables with the entire group, as well as in 2 breakout sessions. One was titled BIPOC and Vulnerable Businesses. And then in the next action table meeting, we shared the information with a different breakout group called Small Businesses. The ordinance has also been shared with the Portland Business Alliance, as well as Oregon Smart Growth.
Before you leave that slide, please, I didn't realize I was going to have so many questions on this until you started your presentation. So I am very unfamiliar with the mayor's action tables. I don't know who's on it. I don't know how representative it is of the business community. I don't know who the BIPOC or vulnerable businesses, how they've been identified. Is there a list of the people that are actually informing this ordinance?
There, we can absolutely, I'm sure the mayor's office can provide a list of the people that attend the action tables. And
so let me just say, I'm asking you because as of today, I don't know who sits at those tables. And if you're asking me to vote on an ordinance, I am asking you as the bureau that's presenting it to make sure I have enough information so that I can make a good decision when this is up for a vote next week.
Okay, point well taken. And we can collect that information for you. And my apologies, I thought that the action tables were well known by all commission offices, and apparently that's not the case.
Commissioner Hardesty, that's a fair request. Mayor, we're asking if you could send that information, and our office will help coordinate that with other commissioners.
I don't know what she's talking about.
Yeah, that's fine. We will do that. And I wasn't aware that this was going to be a conversation about the action tables. So we're more, I've got Sam on the line, but I don't think it's fair to put him on right now without So let's go ahead and do that. If you want to withdraw the ordinance, Commissioner Ryan, we can do it next week.
The first reading.
Mayor, I'm just trying to get information to see who are the voices that inform this, and because I don't have that information.
Yeah, we can.
I'm asking.
Yeah, we can easily get that to you.
This is not an emergency, it's a first reading. So this is why we're having dialogue right now. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we're happy to do that. And Sam says he's happy to do it too. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Okay, so the first item on the in the presentation, first two items have to do with reduced and modified operations. The first item is about allowing certain retail sales and service uses to occur outside. Last spring, when BDS was frantically trying to put information out for restaurants and bars about outdoor operations, we were really pleasantly surprised that the zoning code already included allowances for that. And so we didn't have to approach City Council and ask for any sort of waivers. Over time, what we've realized, and we never said no to any of these, but there's other uses that have inquired about operating outside, such as haircutting and gyms, and the zoning code's less clear about that. And so the first item is to just clarify that it's not just restaurants and bars that can operate outside, but there's other retail sales and service uses that can as well. The next item relates to this photo here. Obviously, when we've been encouraging outdoor business operations, a lot of tent structures have been erected. This one here is at a really great breakfast lunch cafe on North Vancouver called Bread and Honey. And I believe you received testimony from that business about how important the tent has been to their operations. What we've identified is that these tents, after 180 days, require a building permit. And then that would, if they're in a design overlay zone or a historic district, that would require a design review or a historic resource review for the tent, which is one, expensive, two, time consuming, and three, would actually be difficult to approve because of just the general construct. The tents are temporary, and design review and historic resource review are about quality materials and permanence. The intent of this item is to allow outdoor businesses and retail operations to occur. We've put together pros and cons for each of these just to help you formulate your opinions. The pro is that this item addresses the needs for businesses to continue modified operations. And really, it was hard to come up with a con on this one. The only thing I could come up with is that after the timeline expires on this was set at the date identified for economic recovery by the state of Oregon. The con would be is that if the tented structure is really functioning well for a business, then then that business may want to continue its use beyond the date allowed in the ordinance. And then at that point in time, the design review or the historic resource review would have to occur. The next item, this one is tied to the design overlay zoning map amendment adoption of the DOZA project. The DOZA project includes exemptions for certain facade and rooftop venting, as well as some rooftop mechanical equipment. And one of the things we realized in COVID is that the indoor operations, as well as how the air circulates, is something that can impact the safety of employees as well as customers. And so the thought here is to allow for these, to early implement these items related to ventilation and air circulation. The intent here is to implement allowances from the design overlay zoning map amendment project before that project's adopted. The pros would be they allow businesses and building owners to improve ventilation and air circulation without design review. The con is that the project has not passed through City Council, so it would.
Oh, sorry, Matt. I didn't mean to interrupt. Commissioner Mapps had a question. It may be on the prior slide.
Oh, I'll go back.
Finish your thought. I have a question about this proposal in general. Finish your thought, and then I'll put my question on the floor.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Sure.
Okay, and really the only con I could come up with is that this item is currently at City Council. So if City Council was disagreeing with this item in general, then we'd be implementing something that eventually would maybe not go into code. Commissioner Mapps?
Sure. I'm not sure if I intuitively understand what this amendment does. Can you give me one example?
Absolutely, absolutely. Buildings right now, if you put in a facade vent, it would require approval through design review. The proposal that's in front of City Council, or is going to be in front of City Council, creates an exemption for smaller facade vents on the side of buildings so they can be installed and not require approval through design review. The same thing is true for rooftop mechanical equipment. There's greater allowances to install that type of equipment without going through design review. And so this would implement it prior to the DOZA adoption. Does that answer your question?
It does to some degree. I think I may just not understand the mechanics of what's happening here. But between now and our next meeting, I'll meet with your staff, or I'll meet with you or your staff, and you can kind of fill me in.
Sounds good. The next item has to do with non-conforming upgrades. This item would waive non-conforming upgrades during the estimated State of Oregon's estimated timeline for economic recovery. Non-conforming upgrades have to do with things like when a permit is valued at a certain dollar threshold, then there's requirements to add additional amenities or bring certain amenity items up to the current code. And so that could be parking lot landscaping, getting that up to current code requirements. It could also be bicycle parking, bringing that into current code requirements.
Commissioner Hardesty has a question on that.
Sorry. Could you go back to the previous slide, please? So if this was approved, are you saying that we would have no standards under which landscaping would be done until after March of 2023?
We would still have those standards in place. What we wouldn't have is the requirement that if a parking lot wasn't meeting the current standards, then that parking lot wouldn't be required to upgrade to current standards.
So some of the parking lot improvements that need to be made are because of safety issues about how the driveways flow today. So are you telling me that we would allow somebody to build in a place that we would be requiring them to make those improvements, and we would just say, nope, not now, because what? Because we want you to make money?
The non-conforming upgrade standards don't relate to things like where the driveway is or if it's where the driveway is located. With respect to parking lots, it specifically only refers to the amount of landscaping in that parking lot. This is definitely a larger item, and the pros and the cons are larger related to this item as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mapps?
Why don't we get to the pros and cons, and then I'll put my question on the table.
Okay, great. So The intent here is to reduce customer and applicant costs, as well as permit and land use review timelines. This really is to move permits through the process at a faster pace, and then also to save applicants and customers the time and expense of putting together the plans, as well as implementing the upgrades. So the pros are it reduces the timeline for city staff review of permit and land use review applications. It reduces the cost of plan development for BDS customers, and it reduces the complexity of the plans that are submitted. The cons in this case are that non-conforming upgrade requirements only apply to projects valued over $300,000. So this is really, we're looking at the larger projects here. The other con is that upgrades such as parking lot landscaping or additional bicycle parking may be at that time then deferred for a longer period of time, whereas they wouldn't be allowed to without this item. So these, this is, of all the items, the pros and the cons are weigh heavily here. Commissioner Mapps?
I don't have an intuitive sense about the relationship between non-conforming upgrades and COVID. Can you give me an example of non-conforming parking lot landscape upgrade or adding new bicycle parking that is COVID related?
So the way that's a really good question. The way we made the connection here is more in relation to the complexity of plans and the speed of getting a building permit through, as well as the rather significant decrease in commercial building permit applications that we've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. So Matt, I'm trying to understand the latest answer that you gave. So we've seen a drastic decrease in commercial requests, building permits for commercial buildings. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes. In a 6-month period in 2019, we had 624 building permit applications. During a 6-month period in 2020, we had 1,000 building permit applications.
And and how would this change put us on a better path for recovery?
It would, the theory here is that it would encourage building permit applications to be submitted that otherwise wouldn't. It also would save, businesses are struggling. It would save money in terms of making upgrades as well as putting plans together.
So I get the thinking behind this, and knowing that Portland itself is a city of like 95% small businesses. And you may already know how we struggle to actually make opportunity available for minority and women-owned businesses in Portland. And so based on both our prioritizing racial justice and climate mitigation, how does this fit into those core values that we say we have as the city of Portland?
As far as small businesses go, I think that's one of the points I'm trying to make here with one of the con slides, is because non-conforming upgrades apply to projects over $300,000, impacting small businesses may not, this item may not have a significant enough relationship to small businesses obtaining building permit applications. But sometimes a small business may be doing a project that is valued over $300,000. And then, so this would save them the expense of having to put together plans, as well as the expense of bringing some items up into conformance with current code.
And so I think you've just made my point for me. right? If we are trying to help Portland businesses recover from this economic devastation around the pandemic, this will not do anything to achieve that goal. So again, it's like, who is the customer that we're trying to tailor this to? And it's not tailored to Portland businesses who are struggling to stay in business.
That is why this is listed as a con for this item, as well as why the ordinance is structured as a menu. And so if there's items that City Council doesn't agree with, then items can be removed from the ordinance.
Thank you.
Okay. The next item has to do with, and I really struggle to say this word, so I'm just going to say entrepreneurs. The next item has to do with entrepreneurials, and one proposal is to waive additional requirements for convenience stores that are currently in the Portland zoning code. And it's fair to say that because of COVID, we haven't had a rush of convenience, or we haven't seen an increase or a decrease in convenience store building applications. However, the additional code requirements that are applied to convenience stores aren't applied to other businesses with a similar type of impact, such as a late night restaurant or a bar. And so it just really didn't seem appropriate to have these additional requirements for convenience stores, especially considering that 60% of convenience stores are independently owned, and the bulk of those convenience stores in Portland are owned by immigrants or people of color. And so what we're doing is putting an additional barrier in place for the startup of a type of business that is one that we do see businesses and people of color beginning. Commissioner Hardesty?
Are they owned or are they franchised?
The independently owned, 60%, 40%, which then I assume is more like your plaid pantries and your 7-Elevens. The 60%, I believe, are more of the kind of mom and pop convenience stores where it's one person, one business, one owner. Commissioner Mapps?
Can you give me an example or two of the additional requirements we have for convenience stores?
Yeah, exactly. Commissioner Mapps, do you mind if I get to that in the pros and cons? Okay, great. The next item came from our small business liaison on our Empowering Communities team in BDS. She focuses primarily on East Portland and the BIPOC owned businesses. And so therefore has a lot of ties to BIPOC owned businesses, and also knows a lot about the BIPOC community and hears a lot of information there. What she's hearing is that there's a really increased desire to among the BIPOC community to begin to start up businesses. And one of the ways that home occupations or startup businesses are able to do so is by starting as a home occupation, because it saves overhead costs and as well as the cost of renting a separate space. So currently zoning code requirements allow a home occupation with a non-resident employee, or it allows up to 7 customers per day. What the proposal is to allow home occupations to have 1 non-resident employee and up to 15 customers per day. And I will point out, I wasn't able to find any research that was related to this being a Portland phenomenon, but there's a great deal of information out there about how Black women in this country are really leading the effort in starting businesses. And so we thought that opening up these allowances would encourage that effort. The intent is to encourage greater entrepreneurialism, promote small business development, and apply equity. The pros would be a greater home occupation capacity. The cons are reduced regulatory barriers by really just opening up the, allowing it, instead of being an either or, to be an either and. Commissioner Hardesty?
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Matt. So here's an area that I'm really interested in. I think Prosper Portland has done some really phenomenal work around how do you engage racially specific business types, and whether it's My People's Market, which I have to tell you has like over 200 independent vendors. Every time they show up, it's like, you know, you can't walk through it because there's so many people starving for it. So as you were thinking about how to make it easier for these entrepreneurial opportunities to really engage in creating enough mass to be successful, did you also think about the other way? Are there opportunities to relax codes so that we could have 100 of these tiny businesses in a building downtown that otherwise would be empty because there's no storefront activity there? I mean, are you just thinking about what is now or what we could be building towards if we're thinking about how are we going to, on an ongoing basis, create spaces and opportunities for creative spaces? So whether that's tiny businesses, whether it's artist space, is that part of this overall thinking about how do we relax code so as we start recovering, we are actually creating the city we want? Or is this like something else?
This is, what this ordinance is doing is looking at current zoning code regulations and then proposing modifications to those regulations. The Bureau of Planning and Sustainability has really zeroed in on both of these components of the ordinance, and will be tracking and monitoring, if they're adopted, would be tracking and monitoring them closely, and is looking to perhaps expand on those. They could absolutely develop proposals related to what you're discussing, Commissioner Hardesty, and
I'm sorry, these changes would allow something like I've described to actually be developed in a timely manner?
These changes are only to modify current regulations in the Portland Code. They don't create new code. That would be a legislative project from the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. And they are proposing an equity package as well as a recovery package. So I believe what you're describing would fall more into that new code development and new programs, whereas this ordinance really focuses more on modifying the code that we've already got to try to temporarily make it work better.
And Matt, so one last question. How does this proposal address equity?
This proposal addresses equity in two ways. The first is that, like we were talking about, convenience stores in Portland are independently owned. Convenience stores in Portland are predominantly owned by immigrants and people of color, and putting an additional layer of regulations in place for those potential business owners seems to have a equity connection because we've added additional barriers.
And we have additional code on these 60% that we don't have on other established convenience stores?
I'm sorry. That was really just to point out that not all convenience stores are your 7-Elevens and your planned pantries. The code regulations apply to 100% of convenience stores. The point I was trying to make is that a lot of convenience stores in this country are independently owned. And then as far as Portland goes, a bulk of those are owned by people of color and immigrants. The other way looking at equity has occurred with the home occupation item is the recognition of the role that Black women in this country have taken in the beginning of small businesses and trying to open those allowances up so they can, oftentimes a small business starts as a home occupation and then expands from there, trying to open that up. So there's greater allowances to do the home occupation. Here's what we're gonna hit on with Commissioner Mapp's question. The cons of this item is that the home occupation item especially is going to need monitoring, and that's something that the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability is already looking into how to get data and research about current levels as well as future levels, how to mine that from the BDS website. And then the second con, this is answering Commissioner Mapp's question, is that the convenience store regulations, they're really a regulatory way of requiring the convenience store owner to develop a good neighbor agreement, a sort of regulatory good neighbor agreement with neighbors. So it's not that there's bad intention in those regulations. It's just that we don't feel they're applied equitably because they don't apply to other businesses with a similar type of impact, such as late night restaurants or late night bars in Portland. Those regulations only are applied to convenience stores. Does that answer your question? Okay. The next item has to do with temporary signs. We've seen a lot of these in Portland as businesses have modified operations and have needed to alert customers to do so. Actually, if I could go back for just a second. One other thing I'd like to point out about the home occupation items, Commissioner Hardesty, is that we have, in our research, we've noticed that other cities have, in response to COVID, have also increased their allowances for home occupations. This includes the city of Seattle as well.
Thank you. I did see that in attachments.
Okay, great. Other cities also, as far as temporary signs go, have increased their allowances for temporary signs, or in the case that what we're proposing is just to allow them to stay for a longer period of time. The intent here is to allow businesses and retail operations to display signs signaling changes to operations for a longer period of time. The pros, it addresses the need for businesses to notify of modified operations. This could be like seating available outside, that kind of thing. The cons are some signs may end up sticking around for a longer period of time, and eventually that could be a compliance issue if they stay for a longer period of time beyond what's allowed by the ordinance. The next item has to do with boarded up windows and some of which the boarded up windows have been painted with pretty cool murals. When windows are boarded up, oftentimes this means that those windows aren't meeting ground floor window requirements of the Portland zoning code because you can't see through them. So what we've got right now is a lot of buildings with boards over the windows, and therefore that there could be a lot of compliance cases related to, hey, you're not meeting your ground floor window requirements. The proposal would waive these requirements until the state of emergency ends. And again, these timelines are assigned here are based on a city council decision, and city council may not either want boarded up windows to even continue until the state of emergency ends, or City Council may want to allow windows to be boarded for a longer period of time. That's really more of a council policy decision, but we wanted to put something out there that so you could think about it. And then, like I said, some of the boarded up windows have been painted with murals, and there are programs in place that are trying to relocate some of those murals. And what we're proposing is that for those murals, if a mural permit application has been submitted, there's a longer period of time that those boarded up windows that are painted with a mural can stay. And the purpose there is for them to have more time to be relocated. Commissioner Hardesty?
Yes, I'm curious. I know that I wish Commissioner Rubio was here for this conversation. So I'm going to ask the question I think she would ask if she was here, which is, who owns the murals?
That's a really good question. I believe they're donated. There's a part of the research in that went along with the ordinance is a group called Alliance of Artists in Portland, and the George Floyd mural painted on the Apple Store is one that group has acquired and is proposing to locate somewhere. And I don't even know if a location has been found yet for it.
Yeah, that was the Apple Store using a mural that was a very painful reminder of George Floyd's death as a PR opportunity by giving it to a community-based organization. And I asked this question because I know that there are artists that are looking for storage space because they don't want to lose their art creation. And I think that's a paramount question, because if the artist has signed their piece, I would suspect we have an obligation to not assume that somebody else should be making those decisions. So, and I do know that those conversations are taking place, but unfortunately I'm not at that table, but I do know Commissioner Rubio and her office is really tracking how we support artists not being used as PR opportunities, and that the artists get appropriate compensation if people are going to in fact sell it. So I do know that's happening, but I don't have the details. My apologies, but I would just say when Commissioner Rubio's next week, you may want to check in with Commissioner Rubio's office and have a deeper conversation about that.
That sounds good, because I think an assumption was made here that the business, that no business would use a mural of the George Floyd type as a PR. That's gross.
Can we say Apple?
Apple. Oh, yeah.
Apple Computer Store did just that. What do you mean no store would do that?
Well, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean no store would do that. I meant that wasn't
the goal.
That wasn't the goal here. And I think an assumption was made that the store would just readily give the painted mural to the artist. So that's a piece here that wasn't considered. And so your suggestion to check in with Commissioner Rubio's office.
I hate to always be the guy who sounds like I'm sticking up for corporate America, but I gotta say, I met with, I believe she was the director of retail operations via phone a year ago. And they had originally put just blackout panels on their store, and people had started to do art. I called her to check in because I had heard rumors that they did not intend to reopen their store in Portland, and that concerns me. And I have followed up on numerous other rumors over the course of the last year of employers threatening to pull out, or rumors of employers threatening to pull out. And I've just got to be clearer about what she said. The very first thing she said was, we're not going anywhere. And we really want to protect those panels on the outside of the store. And they had already engaged in conversations with the Oregon Historical Society. And I think they were connected to RAC at that point as well. From their perspective, it was always about preservation of street art, which she expressed to me was a very important value for the company. So I just want to give a little commentary on that. I actually thought they were ahead of the curve in terms of seeing the value of this art as expressive of the moment, and expressed, they didn't complain to me about safety. They didn't complain to me about litter. They didn't complain to me about homelessness. They just said, we really want to protect these panels. What can we do to do that? And so I just want to call that out as something I really appreciated.
Well, thank you, Mayor. That's information I did not have, and I'm grateful to hear that, because the only part I see is what I read in the paper, and it's not always the whole story. Thank you very much. But I do think, Matt, I look forward to us finding out what you learned.
Okay. Thanks. So as far as these two items go, the intent is to if City Council desires to set a deadline for the removal of boards over windows, and the deadline would then would signal when enforcement could occur. And then it would also allow some to pursue a city mural application or be preserved. The pros are there would be a more firm timeline about board removal over windows. And then the cons would be that windows may be boarded for a longer period of time if they have a mural on them. And I don't think every mural is worthy of being preserved. So some would be allowed to stay longer just by virtue of having submitted an application for a mural permit. The final item has to do with murals as well.
If I may, I have a question about the boarding, the 8 and 9, if I could. Matt, you with me?
Yes.
First, your presentation makes me think that I probably don't understand the current rules that govern when and where you can board up your windows. Can you give me a quick overview of what the current regulatory landscape on this looks like? Yes.
I can only speak from the perspective of the zoning code. And the zoning code rules are, you need to have a certain percentage of your ground floor needs to be windows, and those need to be transparent windows. And the purpose there is to connect the pedestrian with the activity that's going on inside the place of business or the store. And when those boards disappear, then those ground floor window requirement, or when those boards are located over windows, then that connection between the pedestrian realm and the inside is broken, and the zoning code requirements related to the percentage of ground floor windows that the business must have, or the building must have, are no longer met. As far as the rules of just who can board up their windows, I think during an emergency, I believe that may be allowed. But other than that, the general rules about when and where and how you can board up windows, I don't really think are even clear I think there's just a lot of people saw boards over windows, decided to put their boards over windows, and then more boards were put over windows.
Thank you. And I think that was one of the questions that came up as we were going through your presentation. It sounds like boarded up windows, or at least technically a violation of code. I was wondering if the emergency maybe carves out space to do that anyway. I think the second piece I'd like to share here is more to my colleagues on council. I'd like to have a richer discussion about boarded up windows than I think we're going to have time to do today. In general, I believe that the proposals before us basically incentivize keeping the boards up. One of my personal goals as a member of City Council is to provide incentives for people to get those boards down. And I'm not sure if 8 and 9 actually move us in that direction.
Thanks, Commissioner Mapps. As far as I know, the emergency declaration that was declared doesn't specifically call out, and it's okay to put boards over your windows. And so even right now during the emergency, if there was a compliance case, because a business has boards over their windows, our code compliance team would need to pursue that compliance case. And the purpose of having this, the timeline that was set is really, this is one where we're really talking more about policy that council wants to set. And so this is really just more staff trying to get the issue out there and to point out how it relates to the zoning code and the COVID pandemic. City Council may not agree with the timeline for number 8, the boards being allowed to stay without compliance related to zoning code, even until the state of emergency is no longer declared.
Thank you for that. And thank you for, I think, raising this important kind of policy question. One of the hypotheses that I'm working on right now is that getting those boards off the windows is an important step in our city's recovery from COVID. But that's just a hypothesis at this point. It's a great topic for further discussion. Thank you.
I think you could find a lot of research that would support that exact hypothesis, Commissioner Mapps, which is the boards don't create an inviting atmosphere. They don't make Portland look friendly. The murals definitely help, but I've seen businesses where every window is covered in boards.
Yeah. The same on my part, and I hope that we as a community, maybe at some point in the very near future, ask our local businesses to seriously consider taking those boards down. I think as we do, it'll make the city more inviting, especially as we get downtown. I also appreciate the risk of vandalism and losing your stock. So I don't know when exactly the right moment is, but as I see Portland come back to life, increasingly, I think that the sooner we get those boards down, the more vibrant our recovery will be.
Thank you. If there's no other questions, I'll move on to the final item. This is also related to mural code requirements. In particular, when a mural is proposed, there's a couple requirements that need to be made. It needs to be posted with a sign, and then there needs to be an offer of a public meeting. It doesn't mean a public meeting has to occur. In fact, as far as we know, no one has ever taken up an applicant for a mural on the public meeting allowance. The issues that arise here are that one, during COVID, public meetings are discouraged. And so I know as far as the neighborhood contact requirements go in the zoning code, those were modified to allow those to happen online. As far as the mural meeting requirements go, those weren't modified. And so technically, if somebody did request a public meeting related to a mural, and with these, I'm using the word mural twice in this presentation, meaning two different things. One is boards over windows that are painted, but these mural requirements really apply more to the type that we see on the side of a building. The other issue with the mural requirements is that a sign needs to be posted notifying people that a mural is proposed on the side of the building. Right now with the Development Services Center, really operating on a skeleton crew and not being really fully open, for sure. In fact, being mostly closed. It's applicants aren't able to go and pick up those signs. And so city staff have been driving them to people's homes instead, which just doesn't really seem to be a very good use of city staff time. So the proposal here would be to waive the requirement for a sign and then to waive the requirement that a public meeting would be held.
And you couldn't send it in mail?
I'm sorry?
You couldn't mail them the permit?
No, we can mail them the permit. We can't mail them the sign.
Oh, got it.
The intent is to modify the requirements to address changes in BDS function, as well as related to indoor gatherings. The pros are it addresses adjustments to operations, both at BDS and for indoor gatherings. The cons are an evaluation of whether regulations to post a sign and to potentially host a meeting may even be warranted in the long run, especially considering that what we've heard is that no one ever gets taken up on the allowance to host a public meeting anyway. So therefore, it may be one of those items that we look for when we try to reduce regulation that may be time to go or isn't used. So it may just show that there's no point in having that regulation. Any final questions on this item? Otherwise, I have a summary slide of all of the 10 different items, and I can wrap things up with that. And
I think we can all see that. And thank you for the detailed, really open dialogue you just went through. I know we have some testimony. Maybe we should move to that.
Does that complete the presentation?
Oh, yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Okay, Keelan, how many people do we have signed up to testify?
We have 3 people on the line to testify.
Excellent. Thank you for your patience. Name for the record, 3 minutes each, please.
First, we have Michelle Scholes.
Matt, could you get the screen cleared, please? Thanks.
Hi there, can you hear me? Great.
I'm clear, you sound good.
Good morning. Thank you for your time and commitment to our city and for listening to our testimony today. My name is Michelle Schultz. I'm a principal with GBD Architects, and I'm here today also representing both the BOMA and the NAIOP Board of Directors. I'm providing testimony in support of waiving non-conforming upgrades requirements and BDS's efforts to find ways to foster support for our community's reopening. We are at a critical time in the city's economic and health recovery, at a time when we need to be doing all we can to help support local organizations and businesses' recovery efforts, as Commissioner Hardesty noted in the earlier discussions. Non-conformance upgrades requirements increase the amount of time it takes design professionals to complete drawings and application efforts for permit submittals, which costs business tenants and owners additional time and money. Non-conformance upgrades requirements increase the complexity and review times by city staff, taking away time from city staff's ability to work through the continued backlog of permits in their current review that are hindering development. Non-conformance upgrades are also increasing the cost of construction and scope of construction by an additional 10% at a time when construction costs are increasing and local businesses are suffering from a year of lost rents, reduced building occupancies, and stagnant growth. Longer timelines to issue building permits and longer timelines to complete development projects result in delays in restarting operation of our businesses throughout the city. Many of the affected properties hit the hardest with non-conformance upgrades are smaller buildings outside of the downtown core that are owned by local families and small businesses that have been hit the hardest by the COVID pandemic. These local families and businesses need our help in finding ways to recover, rebuild, and reopen. We work with local landlords who are struggling to find business tenants to lease space in their buildings. The additional time, effort, and expense that are triggered once a tenant improvement project hits $300,000 project valuation threshold for nonconformance upgrades can kill prospective tenant lease deals. Amazingly, $300,000 for a project valuation is not very much in current construction numbers. So just as a side note, we are seeing business tenants stop looking at space in the city of Portland and instead moving their searches to surrounding metro communities where these triggers and added expenses are not a factor. Our city cannot afford to lose more local businesses. We need building occupants to come back to the city and not move out of the suburbs. Waiving nonconformance development upgrade requirements will make permit reviews faster and help reopening projects feasible during this time of recovery. Anything the city of Portland can do to make it a more efficient and economically viable for local business projects will be a huge boost to the city's recovery. On behalf of myself, the NAOP, and the BOMO membership, thank you for your consideration and support of this ordinance.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate your testimony.
Next up, we have Matt Shope.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your time. My name is Matt Shope. I'm a leasing director with the Doughty Group. The Doughty Group is an owner-operator of grocery-anchored shopping centers throughout the Western states. In the Portland market, we own and operate Mall and Plaza 205 on Southeast Washington at the 205. Our experience with the non-conforming upgrades is that while typically great in theory, in practice, the non-conforming upgrades often affect a small interior-only projects that can double, if not greater, the level of design effort and review, oftentimes resulting in a small impact upgrade. In addition, the level of detail required to document the required and proposed upgrades is very intensive. Non-conforming upgrades can require design review, even if the main project did not, thus adding a layer of process. Typically, we found at least 3 to 4 months to an already complex approval process. As you all know, improvements in properties often occurs in multiple phases. You have the landlord work, typically the core work, shell work, and then tenant improvements. And often additional separate improvements and non-conforming upgrades are required for all, but can only be permitted with one permit. This phasing can be very complicated and difficult to plan for in leasing of available spaces. And then lastly, in our business, as you all know, time kills deals. We continue to operate in a very challenging leasing environment, and permitting timelines often play a huge role in deal making. One example at Mall 205 recently was we had a large national tenant looking to take a significant chunk of our vacancy. Tenant would have provided jobs and a draw to the area that it desperately needs, but the deal timeframes did not work out because of the design review involved, which included non-conforming upgrades, coordination for multiple phases, and long permitting processes at the City of Portland. We appreciate your time on this effort and thank you for your consideration of it.
Thank you, Matt.
Excuse me, Mayor. I forgot to ask that gentleman if he was a lobbyist on behalf of his organization.
No, I'm not. I'm a leasing director directly involved in the day-to-day leasing of Mall and Plaza 205.
I just wanted to check to see if you were a registered lobbyist for the City of Portland. Thank you.
No.
Mayor, that completes testimony.
All right, very good. Any further discussion, questions, thoughts before I move this to second reading?
Yes, Mayor.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you.
Commissioner Mabs.
You know, I have real concerns about removing the requirement for bike lanes as an example, reducing the landscape, even short term. The reality is we live here long term, and to remove aesthetics or opportunities to have people bike throughout our city and actually have bike parking access, to me, based on what I've heard today, that is not a compelling reason at all for me to actually waive that regulation. But I want to be clear. It is clear that it takes way too long to permit at the city of Portland. And based on what Matt has presented today, I think there are a couple of good ideas in this package, but I am a long way from being ready to vote on this because based on what we say we want to do, Matt has clearly said it's not getting us the outcome with small businesses who are the backbone of our city. So this will help a very narrow group of business owners. It's not going to actually help us invest in our small business community and help them come back. And if we're going to make temporary changes, that would be the population I would be most focused on. And I'm not comfortable that this package has done enough due diligence and actually really reaching out to figure out how do we support the small businesses that actually make up Portland and help them robustly come back. Because once they come back, the other folks will follow as well. So that's where I am at the moment.
Commissioner Mapps and Commissioner Ryan.
Sure. Like Commissioner Hardesty, there's some proposals that I saw today that I like a lot. Some I have some questions about. I think I do like about the design of this particular proposal is that we have a series of essentially pilot studies that pilot projects that if we change the rule here, do we get more murals in a way that we like? Do we attract, or if we change our compliance rules, do we get an outcome we'd like? So a thing that I'd like to see part of this proposal, should we pass, given whatever we pass, is maybe at some point before the expiration of the waivers that we have some sort of evaluation. So we see sort of a before and after, did these policies make a difference? If these policies are working, I'd love to be able to kind of continue them. And if we change some rules and the results are not so good, I'm thinking about the good neighbor agreements with the grocery stores, for example, maybe that's, this was a direction we didn't want to go in. So I just wanted to offer that. And I want to thank staff for taking us through a lot of material really fast.
Commissioner Ryan.
Yeah, thank you. Matt, I want to start off by thanking you for hanging in there. And, I think the best government is when we're honest and we have dialogue. So that's what happened. I also know you presented this to staff at CAB. And it was pretty quiet. So sometimes it's quiet there and then we have questions here. So I think what's important is that we're at a time where we need to implement some of these really good ideas that will help our businesses and our economy recover. Most cities are lining up to do some of this work right now. And it's very nuanced as well. And so I think that what we need to do is obviously you have a lot of questions and concerns and we get to huddle up and take it back to CAB and see what we can move forward. I also want to thank the people who came to testify today and also for your patience. It was very good to hear your perspective. We are here at BDS to serve with our partners. It's a two-way street. And so it's really important that we get your perspective on this. We live in a bubble sometimes, so we need to hear from you. Anyway, thank you so much, Matt. And I look forward for this to come back. Might be modified a bit, it sounds like, but we need to move some things forward, many parts of this forward. Thank you.
And I'll just add my own thoughts since everybody else has. I do have a couple of questions that I think I can resolve in the next week. So that shouldn't be a problem. I just don't see the need to follow up with them right here and now at this particular moment. Plus, I want to think about it a little more. But as a value, I think that one of the most important things we can do as a city council is pave the way to economic recovery and reopening of this city. And small businesses have been very challenged during this COVID crisis. Commissioner Ryan and I actually had a chance just yesterday afternoon to meet with an entrepreneur in this city. And he told us this story about actually renovating his facility during COVID and what a financial risk that was, because he didn't actually know whether he was going to be able to stay in business or how long the shutdown was going to last, or whether he would be able to attract new employees to come back over a substantial recess. And it really struck me that his story is not even close to the first time I've heard this. I've heard this 1,000 times over the last year about how mom and pops, independent retailers, restaurants, and others are really struggling financially. And it isn't just about the business owners and operators. It's about their employees, and it's about their neighborhoods, and it's about the community. And a lot of the issues that we have seen that we're all hearing a lot about, whether it's safety, whether it's homelessness, whether it's about the recovery from COVID, are related to getting businesses back into the business of business and reactivating our sidewalks and our neighborhood business districts in the downtown area. And I appreciate, Commissioner Ryan, that you and Bureau staff have brought forward a large number of ideas, and we should take the time to poke through them and see how we can strengthen them or improve them. But I really appreciated this conversation and the questions that were asked. There's a lot of meat here on these here bones, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. So thank you for bringing it. This is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. With that, we'll move to item 466, emergency ordinance.
Authorize the Bureau of Transportation to acquire certain permanent and temporary rights necessary for construction of the Northeast 97th Avenue Phase 2 and Northeast Cooch Davis Local Improvement District projects through the exercise of the city's eminent domain authority.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Agenda item 466 will be presented by PBAT staff. I believe I saw someone on this line just a second ago. Did I just lose him? That I saw. Oh.
No,
Hi,
that's me. Hi, good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Marty Maloney with PBOT Right of Way. And for this presentation, I'm joined by Andrew Abbey as well, who will actually start off the presentation by providing an overview of the project before I go into the nuance of the condemnation ordinance. So Andrew Abbey, if you can take it away, that would be great. And I will handle the slides.
And before I start, Commissioner Hardesty, do you have any introductory remarks you want to make?
No, I will just let you take it away due to the late hour.
Okay, we'll try to be brief with this. Next slide, please.
Oh, sorry.
So I'll be really brief. I did want to just provide a very basic project overview since most of the council members are new since these LIDs were formed. So the Gateway District was launched with in 1954 with the advent of construction of the Gateway Fred Meyer, very auto-oriented neighborhood at the time. And here we are over 65 years later, and Hazelwood still has a lower proportion of sidewalk coverage than the city as a whole, despite having 3 light rail lines running through the area and being designated as a pedestrian district. Next slide, please. So one of the key aspects of this project is we're partnering with TriMet to improve the rail safety at the 97th and Burnside intersection. Currently, that's a less than optimal ped and bike crossing there, where the MAC Blue Line transitions from running on Burnside Street to I-205 and vice versa. So TriMet is helping fund this project, and we will be improving that rail connection, which is, or I should say the ped bike connection, which is also a key link in the I-205 multi-use path. Next slide, please. And this is the streetscape scene that you would see today on Northeast 97th Avenue. You can see we not only don't have sidewalks, but we also lack stormwater management systems. You can see that this neighborhood is severely blighted. We have boarded up houses and things like that are not providing good housing options for people who need the housing most. I would just note on the bottom of that slide that Gateway is designated to be the most dense area of the city outside of downtown, but it's not going to become that until we build this infrastructure. Transportation and stormwater infrastructure. Next slide, please. So this is just the rendering of what we would like to see.
Mayor, would you go back one slide, please?
Sure.
I just wanted to slightly correct a statement that you made. Just because I live in this neighborhood, directly across the street from here are very beautifully well-maintained middle-class homes. Just behind that fence is Fred Meyer's. So, so I don't want you describing my neighborhood as a blighted neighborhood. There's some, and you're absolutely right about the street improvements that we must make. But that statement struck me because I actually walk this path regularly, and I just wanted to put on the record that Gateway is a lovely mixed income community, and we want to make it better.
Right. No, I appreciate that, Commissioner, and your point is very well taken. I think a better way to characterize it, Commissioner, is we have blight interspersed, as you correctly point out, some really lovingly cared for homes. And to your point, Commissioner, many of those homes are going to remain even after the LID is constructed. So I don't want to give council the impression that each and every one of these homes is going to be gone tomorrow. But what we can do is set this up to take care of the homes that are really kind of pulling down the rest of the neighborhood. So I appreciate your remarks very much. This is just a slide of what the neighborhood is anticipated to look like after full build out. And I really want to stress that it's not going to be built all at once. It's going to be built as property owners want to redevelop. So it'll be a phased approach to development. Next slide, please. And then this is a potential future park in the Gateway area. There's been some thought of partnering with the Parks Bureau. We haven't really had a lot of detailed conversations on that yet, but we are thinking ahead not only to the street infrastructure, but also how we might be able to build gathering places as well. That isn't part of this LID, but this LID may help set the stage for additional great things to happen in Gateway. Next slide, please.
Could I ask a question on that? And then I see.
Sure.
So can you go back to that slide, please? So I have had this slide put in front of me for 4+ years. And it is a compelling vision. I love it, to be honest with you. And it's a great location. I've actually gone out there with some of the advocates. You may even been on that tour with me. I can't remember. But it's a compelling vision, and I believe that it would be catalytic for that neighborhood. Where are we really with regard to that park? I mean, we just passed the levy. We have the bonding. You know, maybe there's a question for the parks folks and not you, and I'm putting you unfairly on the spot, as I often do. But I'm just curious, where is this in my lifetime? Where are we with this park?
Well, Commissioner, I'm sorry, Mayor.
Doesn't matter. People call me a lot worse than Commissioner, believe me.
I was looking at Commissioner Hardesty, but at any rate, Mayor, you asked a very good question. And, you know, I do want to emphasize to council that even though I'm the city's local improvement district administrator, I'm housed in Peabody, I'm not housed in parks. So I don't want to necessarily set parks up to a commitment here, but I really appreciate your sharing the vision with us. I think what the vision here is that the development community would step up, and I think there's a lot of interest in doing a public-private partnership, and then maybe the model that we land on here is something where the private sector can do the long-term operating and maintenance of this new park when it happens. So those are all details to be fleshed out. But the short answer to you, Mayor, is that
no.
There's more to come. I do think it'll be in your lifetime, for the record.
All right.
And I think here is the key ingredient that I think that we have been achieving in Gateway. The most successful urban renewal area in the history of the state of Oregon was Ronler Acres in Hillsborough, which is now home to the largest private sector employer in the state of Oregon, which is Intel. None of that happened until the city of Hillsborough went around and acquired a bunch of different properties and fragmented ownership to make that happen. This is now happening at Gateway. The city is not buying up the properties, but what we've had is a very collegial relationship between about a half dozen property owners, and those properties are slowly starting to be assembled so that there are big enough tracts of land where we can start doing the next steps to getting to these outcomes that we want.
Yeah,
so we got a long road ahead of us, but I think we're definitely on the way.
And Andrew, this leverages this. Oh my God, I can't even speak today. This leverages off of prior LIDs that we have already approved, correct?
Absolutely correct, Mayor.
Just right down the street, we approved, I think, 2 LIDs, didn't we? Or was it just the one?
Yes, no, you're absolutely correct, Mayor. You may recall I closed out an LID about a month or 2 ago, and there was a property owner who had signed up for 3 LIDs, and now he's in the mix to get his 4th LID. So,
okay, good.
Similar result here for Gateway. So we finished up an LID on the north segment of 97th, which is why we called this new LID the Northeast 97th Avenue Phase 2 LID. And then we came back a few months later and did the Northeast Cooch Davis LID. So we're really designing and acquiring right-of-way and are going to build these second and third LIDs in Gateway as a combined project. What I'm alluding to with this park and these other infrastructure aims that we have, Mayor, is that I think there's a very good shot at having even a 4th LID in Gateway. And I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I just want you to know there's property owner interest in doing that. So we're starting to have those conversations.
Good. Well, if anybody can pull it off, you can. Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure that Andrew also talked about what's anticipated with the expiration of the URA, because that traditionally is the City of Portland's development tool. And if it's going away, how does this public-private partnership work out?
Very good question, Commissioner Hardesty. And I must once again stress that I'm the city's LID administrator housed in PBOT, so I'm not in a position to speak for Prosper. What I can say is Prosper committed $2 million of funding towards the LIDs that are in front of you today, which have already been approved by council. And the expiration of the URA does not impact the ability of those TIF funds to flow to these LIDs. But to your point, there is more work to be done with Prosper on this currently formed LID. And if we do get to a conversation about a new LID in Gateway, there's probably going to be a mix of discussions about urban renewal and PBOT SDC revenue and other traditional funding mixes. And that's another conversation for another day. But to your point, if Prosper were to be part of that mix, then there would need to be an extension of the URA. But I just can't underscore the importance of these LIDs moving along. And there's a bunch of additional steps we need to do to get this development to occur. And I can't stress the importance of this enough. If we don't get this development to occur, we're not going to get tax increment coming to Gateway, and we're not going to have the resources to do all the great things that we want to do in Gateway. So this is kind of part of the
I guess, Andrew, my only caution, and I absolutely support this LID, and I think, it says something when you have a business owner that's on 4 of them and, is still a happy camper, that says that we're making the right investments in the community. I would just say that I hope no one assumes that there's any extension of urban renewal dollars, because as you know, our budget projections are really built on those dollars returning to the general fund. So the city council will be having that conversation later this year. But for my newer colleagues, I just wanted us to have that conversation on the record so that we're having it in context to future conversations that we're going to have. Thank you.
And Commissioner, thank you. Your remarks are points well taken. And to be very clear for the record, we're not banking on any more Prosper Portland dollars. I just can't stress this enough that we're just kind of looking ahead to the next opportunity. We're just starting to have these conversations. I would really, really stress the public-private partnership aspect of this, and I have other financing ideas in mind, and I won't get into them now because the day's long, but I just can't make it any more clear. I'm not banking on more money from the Gateway URA. I just want to get these projects successfully built. So Marty just put up the slide now with the project goals. I'm not going to read through all those. But you can just see there's a lot of different objectives that we're trying to achieve in Gateway. It isn't just building transportation infrastructure. It's placemaking and just really making Gateway a great new neighborhood. And when I say new neighborhood, I'm talking about an inclusive neighborhood that accommodates a variety of housing types, market rate, affordable, different family sizes, that type of thing. Next slide. So before I turn it over to Marty, Marty, did you have the slide that just shows the property takes? Did you skip over that one? There we go. Thank you. My last slide before I turn it over to Marty. These two LIDs combined that council approved about 2 years ago. This is a very large project area, but what I want to show you here is that we have 34 properties in the combined two LIDs that we're currently designing. And we have been very thoughtful about minimizing displacement and takings of buildings. In fact, the locations of the streets were negotiated with property owners and carefully designed to minimize removal of existing buildings. If you look at that dashed black line on the top part of the screen there, the slide, that is the future Davis Street. And Davis Street will be the first and only east-west connection between 97th and 100th, between Burnside and Gleason. And of the 3 houses that we need to take, 2 of them are currently vacant. And of those 2 vacant homes, 1 was recently destroyed by an arson and is hazardous and needs to be taken out anyway. So I'm clearly going to put that one in the blighted category. And the one in turquoise at the very east end, that is the only acquisition that we anticipate that will actually displace an existing resident. So we're only talking 1 displacement out of 34 residential properties. And we do have a 1 outbuilding on Northeast Cooch Street, which is the dotted black line on the south part of the slide. There is an outbuilding that'll need to be removed, but there's an existing business there, and the main building will remain, and that business will remain in business. And last, before I turn it over to Marty, I just want to say that we were very transparent with the neighborhood. When we had property owner meetings prior to petitioning the LID, we went over all the street locations and what the impact of the property would be. So this was all communicated with the property owners before we even formed the LID. And we did not receive any objection to any remonstrances to LID formation on either one of these 2 LIDs in Gateway. So with that, I'll turn it over to Marty Maloney, and he'll take you through the rest of it.
Mayor and Commissioners, Marty Maloney, PBOT right away. Agenda item 466 gives PBOT authority to compensate affected property owners for the needed property rights and, if necessary, to condemn for these rights associated with the project. Permanent and temporary property rights from 21 individual properties have been identified as necessary. Permanent rights are needed from 9 of those properties for completion of the roadway facilities. The project will also require relocation of 1 single family dwelling, like Andrew had spoke about, and a portion of that commercial business. During the right-of-way phase of the project, PBOT will provide relocation advisory assistance for both the tenant and owner throughout the relocation process. Both the tenant and owner are eligible for relocation benefits such as replacement site search, moving expenses, commercial reestablishment costs, and rent supplements. PBOT will work with the residential tenant to find decent, safe and sanitary housing close to their current location as well. Affected property owners have also been informed of the project and the need for the property rights and were invited to attend this council reading. So that completes the presentation. Thank you for all of your guys' time. And if you have any questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them at this time.
Colleagues, any questions before we turn it over to public testimony? Seeing none, Keelan, do we have any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up for this item.
All right, this is an emergency ordinance. Please call the roll.
Ryan.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Marty. Really thorough presentation. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
Yes, thank you very much, Andrew and Marty, for that presentation. Thank you for helping us understand kind of the process that we are going through. I'm happy to vote aye.
Pabst,
Aye.
Wheeler,
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Thank you. 467, please. Non-emergency ordinance.
increase fee schedule for the Office of Community and Civic Life Noise Program for noise variance applications in the amount of 5% as permitted by Title 18.14.020.B.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to turn over the presentation to Catherine Cooch from the Office of Civic and Community Life. This is a normal annual update, fee increase, and Catherine will tell us all about it. Good
Hello,
afternoon.
everybody. As the commissioner said, I am Catherine Couch with the Office of Neighborhood Involvement. Oh, sorry. How ridiculous. I'm with Civic Life, sorry, in the noise program and the livability. I'm the coordinator for that. So I am here today to ask for consideration of our annual 5% fee increase. It's already included in the budget, and this increase, it adds to the general fund dollars to allow us to help address noise complaints by paying for noise variances. We have sent it to the Noise Review Board and they're okay with it. And that is about all I have to say, unless you'd like me to screen share the numbers that I have. That's up to you. And if you have any questions.
Mayor, what's your pleasure? I have it in my packet, but if others want it up on the screen.
I don't need it. Colleagues, anybody else want it? I'm not seeing rousing demand. Catherine, thank you. No?
I think so.
Great. Does that complete your testimony?
It really does. There's not much else to say on it unless anybody has any questions.
Well, let's see if we've got any public testimony. Keelan, anybody want to testify on this item?
No one signed up for this item.
All right, I think we are good. Colleagues, any question before I move this non-emergency ordinance to second reading? Seeing none, this is a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.
468, please.
Approve findings to authorize an exemption for a class of public improvement contracts from the competitive bidding requirements and authorize the use of the alternative contracting method of price agreements for construction services.
This is a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second. Oh my God. It's just one of those days. This is a non-emergency ordinance. Commissioner Maps.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, colleagues. The ordinance before us today does two very important things. First, it will help environmental services maintain and repair Portland's critical wastewater and stormwater infrastructure. Second, it proposes a new and innovative approach to help this council meaningfully meet our goals for minority contracting. As you know, environmental services manages Portland's wastewater and stormwater infrastructure. Our mission is to protect public health and the environment. In order to accomplish that mission, environmental services operates 2 wastewater treatment plants and nearly 100 pump stations. This infrastructure serves nearly 1 million people in the Portland metro area, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The ordinance before us today would create a new way to efficiently and equitably make repairs and modifications to environmental services, wastewater and stormwater infrastructure. The ordinance authorizes environmental services to establish 3 price agreements valued at $6 million over a 5-year period for small-scale plant and pump station projects. My colleagues, this is the kind of ordinance that is fairly standard for a infrastructure repair plan. We approve projects like this on the consent agenda nearly every week. However, this item is on the regular agenda today because I wanted to give you a heads up that there is something remarkable, even revolutionary, baked into this ordinance. It is no secret that this council has been frustrated by the city's uneven success at finding minority contractors to work on our infrastructure projects. The Bureau of Environmental Services has heard the council's expectation that the city do a better job at engaging with minority contractors. That's why Environmental Services has worked with the Procurement Office to develop a new method for engaging minority contractors, a method which we are confident will diversify the city's contracting workforce from the apprenticeship level all the way up to the business owner level. That new method is piloted in the ordinance before us today. Here today with a brief presentation on this exciting project are Darren Wilson, Engineering Supervisor at Environmental Services, and Paul Suto, our Chief Engineer at BES. Gentlemen, whoever would like to go first can take it over now.
Thank you for the introduction, Commissioner Mapps, and good afternoon, Mayor Wheeler and Commissioners. For the record, I'm Paul Suto, BES Chief Engineer. As Commissioner Mapps well said, kind of the lead up to this, but I just wanted to kind of add that last year we were actually ready to come to council to request approval for continuing basically what we had been doing before, which is a construction price agreement for the priority and urgent projects at the wastewater treatment plants and pump stations. And these price agreements have been very successful in helping us get our work done in a timely manner to maintain service levels for the community and maintain permit compliance. These have been directed at the sheltered market program, and they were based on the traditional low bid approach and aspirational goals. So like I said, we were ready to come before you about a year ago. And at the time we decided to pull it because a lot of what we were hearing from council is that we need to do something more with encouraging more minority contracting on our construction projects and to do something different. So we pulled the item, we regrouped with our partners in procurement and as well as within BES, the city attorney's office, and spent the better part of the past year collaborating on a different approach. I also wanted to acknowledge Kathleen Brendes-Marua, the interim CPO from procurement, is here today as well to assist with any clarifications on this ordinance item. So with that, I'll hand it off to Darren, who will walk you all through the presentation today. Thank you.
We can't hear you, Darren. I think you're muted.
No. Still can't hear you, and he's not muted either.
Paul, can you handle it?
Potentially, yeah. Darren, are you connected to the audio? All right. Yeah, I don't have the notes that Darren has, but I can do a walkthrough kind of quickly. And maybe Darren, is there a call-in number where he can do a voice call-in and I could flip the slides?
Yes, we can send that number.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, that'd be great.
We can hear you now.
Oh, you can hear me now?
Heard you, yeah.
We can hear you.
I must have hit the right setting at the right time. Okay, awesome. Well, I apologize for that glitch. So I'll start over again, and my apologies. So thank you, Paul and Commissioner Mapps, for that awesome introduction. And good morning, Mayor and City Commissioners. What I wanted to highlight is that not only am I presenting today for this request for authorization, but I've also been the contract manager for our prior price agreements for the on-call construction work for BES since 2017. So I'm hoping that I can provide a little bit of background of what we've experienced over the last few years. And so also as I go through the presentation, please feel free to ask me any questions as they come up. It might be more efficient that way. So as we were preparing to make this presentation, we realized that before we get into the slides, it might be good to just sort of provide a framework of what we've learned on our prior agreements, and the fact that, as Paul mentioned, we've heard loud and clear that council is expressing the desire that we be thinking outside the box, that we try to engage with the minority contractors who are available, rather than just simply focusing on meeting COVID aspirational goals. So we've been thinking about how best to do that. And so we thought it'd be good to go back and look at what we've already accomplished on our price agreements previously. So next slide, please. Next, yeah, there you go, great. So on this slide, just to give you a little background of why we're doing this, this illustrates that the utilization goals on our prior 2 price agreements far exceeded what we've aspired to achieve. So on those 2 contracts, we had 82% and 92% COVID certified contractors, and that included both prime contractors for those contracts. However, both prime contractors, neither one of them were minority owned. Additionally, of the subcontractors used on our task order projects under the prior agreements, 42% and 56% were COVID certified. So again, we're meeting our aspirational goals, but of those, on one contract, not one subcontractor was a minority firm, and on the other one, only 2.2% was performed by a minority COVID certified firm. So this really illustrates, I think, the fact that we have done a great job, I think, meeting aspirational goals, but certainly not the directive that we should be meeting higher expectations to engage our minority contracting community. Next slide, please. So as Paul and the commissioner mentioned, we're trying to...
I believe Commissioner Hardesty has a question. Excuse me.
Yes, go right ahead.
Thank you. Would you go back a slide, please? What are our goals when it comes to utilization? Our goals are not just that they're COVID, right? We have a whole alphabet soup, MWESB, blah, 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 right? So I challenge the statement that we far exceeded our goals, because our goals is inclusive of all those demographics of folks. So I would respectfully disagree that you have actually far exceeded even the goals, the limited goals that we have on paper. So I just wanted to put that on the record. I don't think that's an accurate statement to make.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. And I'm not sure if Kathleen would like to clarify what our goals are, since procurement, they're the ones that actually help manage that part of our contracting process.
Yes, so the goals that Darren is referring to here, those that have been set through our subcontractor equity program policy. And so as currently written, it does focus on COVID certified and as an aspirational goal of 20%. So he's just referring to the current state of things, but is recognizing that the way that the policy is currently set is not achieving the greater goal of providing equal access and opportunities to all of our contracting community.
I know we will continue to have this conversation because procurement conversations are very necessary as we move forward. And again, let me just say that if our goals initially were not to ensure that we were covering the whole gambit of people who fall into that COVID category, the whole 20% of contractors who do, I think the goals are for the contract. So I'm actually concerned when we present it as if we're far exceeding our goals, because we're not. I'm just going to leave it there. This will be an ongoing conversation, I know, but I'll just leave this part for the moment.
Thank you, Commissioner Maps.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to add from the perspective of BES and myself, I think we agree with the broad principle that Commissioner Hardesty is trying to underscore here. That's why BES has worked with procurement to develop the innovative solution to doing better on minority contracting that we're going to present to you over the course of the next several minutes.
Thank you, commissioners. Appreciate that. So our new project objectives, as has been mentioned, is we're going to try something different. So again, rather than going through a process of determining lowest cost of qualified contractors, we're looking at the RFP approach so that we can review a contractor's proposal for how they plan to achieve these other goals that we have related to minority firms, using them on our projects, but as well the apprenticeship programs that they're actually encouraging minority workers at, presumably a younger age. Some of those workers may become the next owners of some of our minority firms that we want to work with into the future. And then, of course, through that process, we'll be tracking their performances in those various areas. But basically, as we review their proposals during the RFP, we'll be focusing on how they can increase contractor diversity, increase apprenticeship worker diversity, and of course, the bottom line is also managing our costs, but managing within a reasonable estimate, but not lowest necessarily in every case. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, I'd already gone on to this one. Next slide after that, please. Thank you. So again, the price agreement overview is to negotiate these with these diverse certified firms. They may be prime contractors bidding it. They may be partners with the prime bidding these as subcontractors, as well as looking at their diversity around their apprenticeship labor programs. We then establish not to exceed costs for each particular task order. We'll look at those task orders and identify what their participation is within the minority community, as well as achieving goals in the apprenticeship program as well. And then finally, the costs are established on a not to exceed, and we pay them based on time and material with the established markups, labor, and equipment rates per the contracts.
Darren, could I ask you a question? And it's
Absolutely.
not directly maybe germane, but it's in the presentation. What are we looking at?
Oh, I'm sorry. So all the photos in the presentation are photos of work being performed under the prior price agreements.
Yeah, what is a wet weather clarifier?
Great question. So we have different clarifiers at the plant. We have dry weather and we have wet weather. In this case, the wet weather clarifiers were the original, well, some of them are the original clarifiers for the plant back when it was originally constructed, which now we use as basically the wet weather train for the flows as they're coming in primarily during storm events.
And how does it clarify the water? Is there a filter or something?
Well, basically, we're trying to get the scum to float to the top, and then it's skimmed off. And then they're using the conveyor system on these large chains basically to kind of mix things up.
I see. So it's like my morning cup of coffee times a million. Got it. Good. Thank you.
Right.
I was
exactly.
curious since the photos were there and I wasn't really sure what I was looking at. Thank you.
Yeah. In fact, just if you've been out to the plant on a tour, just down the sidewalk from here is the espresso building.
Got it. Awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
No problem. Okay. Next slide, please. So again, this is sort of the high level of the two different treatment plants, of course, at Columbia Boulevard, as well as Tryon Creek. Next slide, please. And this is basically a diagrammatic of our pump station map. And as already mentioned, BES has approximately 100 pump stations where we're collecting and basically transferring those flows out to the two treatment plants. Next slide, please. And so again, some repeat photos here, but basically the overview of our projects. These are typically smaller projects, considered emergency or at least urgent type of projects. We do things like structural repairs to buildings, tank replacements, piping, electrical, safety, and mechanical improvements. And these are all things that have been identified as critical infrastructure needs in order to keep our facilities operational and maintained properly. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, we've really partnered with procurement to establish this new concept of soliciting an RFP to select contractors for these price agreements. What we have identified is it's not enough just to put it on the street for prime contractors. So we're partnering with procurement. We're planning to have 2 informational sessions if this is authorized by council on July 28th and August 5th. Ideally, we would then be able to advertise the RFP in September, early September, ideally. And then with procurement's help, we'll be contacting some of these organizations that are part of the COVID certified database to help get the information out to those firms so they're aware of what we're doing. They can hopefully team up with some of the other contractors and at least help build these relationships because, right, we tend to see the same contractors over and over who get used to our work. They get proficient in it. The more proficient they are, obviously, maybe they can make a little more money. And how do we then get minority firms to compete? So the RFP allows us to selectively work with those firms rather than always focusing just on low bid. So that's part of our outreach.
Commissioner
Next
Hurst,
slide, please.
and Commissioner Ryan.
Yes.
If you have, do you have more? How much more presentation do you have, Darren?
Just a few minutes.
All right, I'll hold my.
I think 3 more
questions.
slides.
Okay, I'll hold my questions until he's done.
Same.
Okay, thank you. So we have some of our staff that are mining the COVID database on the state's website, so we can capture that information in an Excel spreadsheet and really start to target some of the minority firms who we think we could be working with. So, you know, the database itself is huge, but yet we have certain trades that we tend to work with the most. Obviously, electrical is a big one. HVAC, metal fabrication is a huge one. Painting, plumbing, roofing, and welding contractors. So just wanted to make you be aware of that. Next slide, please. So as far as our request in the proposed draft ordinance, we'd like to hire up to 3 contractors based on their qualifications, their ability to demonstrate diversity and inclusiveness, not only in their firm, but also in teaming up with other subcontractors. And also their apprenticeship program, and then also their ability to provide reasonable costs. The contractors are expected to do that outreach, not just to COVID firms, but specifically the minority firms as well. But as we've discussed, you know, it's across the gamut. It's trying to increase our participation across the board. But I think the key thing is how do we bring more minority firms in? Then task orders, we traditionally have been awarding those on a rotational basis, but with this RFP, we're talking about which firm can meet our diversity goals. So if one contractor doesn't have a sub available, then why don't we go to the next one? So again, we're encouraging those minorities' ability to be doing some of our work. Next slide, please. And this will be the last slide. So as far as the budget and schedule, we have a budget of $18 million to award 3 contracts up to $6 million for a 5-year period. Individual task orders, we're requesting to be up to $1 million. And so I thought it'd be good to share a little bit of what we've learned on our prior price agreements. Previously, task orders were limited to $750,000. On average, our task orders are around $400,000. We've had a couple projects that hit the 750 mark. And what we're concerned about is that if we want to increase minority participation, minority firms, more apprenticeship hours, and the fact that we're seeing huge inflation right now in construction materials, we're concerned about that 750 cap. So we think it's more prudent to target a $1 million cap But in reality, most of our work is not going to be that high. Most of it's going to be probably 600, 700,000 would be the typical range that we would expect. There's no guarantee that any contractor is going to get that much money. There's no guarantee they're going to get $1 million per task order. These are just the thresholds. And then, of course, I don't know how clear it was in the ordinance, but procurement always approves all task orders before we actually finalize the agreements. So as mentioned earlier, we're hoping to advertise in September if this is authorized, so that we can begin the initial task order work starting in January of 2023. So that ends my presentation. If there's any other questions.
Commissioner Hardesty, then Commissioner Ryan, please.
So thank you, Darren, for that very detailed presentation. Let me start with this question. Based on your success the last time you did this program, why would I want to authorize you to have $18 million and then come back 5 years from now and tell us whether or not you've had any success at all? Why would I do that as an elected official?
Well, Commissioner, I think there's a couple things. We've heard prior comments that we need to do better reaching out to minority firms. And what we recognize is following our traditional model of low bid contracting, that's not working. As Kathleen mentioned, we have these goals. Those goals are actually part of our contractor's contract. By doing an RFP, it gives us more ability to help direct that towards minority firms. But I think the other thing is we're also recognizing that because we're asking contractors to invest more in establishing relationships, apprenticeship programs, that it's prudent that we give them time to become successful. And I think the other thing we've learned—
Let me stop you for just a second, Darren. It is not our goal to build the diversity of these contractors. They either appropriately respond to our RFP or they don't, right? I mean, so I would be open to a 1-year pilot that would be open to be renewed only if the specific goals had been met the previous year. And if it wasn't, then I would put it back out again and I would go to another contractor. If I appear frustrated, I am, because of the assumptions that we make going into this process. It should not cost us more to actually reflect the full workforce in the city of Portland in our contracting. What we should be doing is holding people accountable for what we say our goals are. And so again, I have no interest in actually giving you $18 million and having you come back in 5 years and have the numbers look pretty much how they look today, unless I see a real plan on how we get there. I would be open to a pilot that was very specific. And again, if you didn't reach the goal, because hey, I'm not interested in aspirations. I'm interested in outcomes. And so that's where I am at the moment. When you did it before, it was not a priority that women and people of color owned contractors benefited. And so we gave you the opportunity then, and you showed us the numbers. It was 0, and then it was 0.2%, right? I need proof. I can't take your word that just because you're doing something, and this is not outside of the box thinking, this has been done before with much better outcomes. So that's where I am at the moment.
Commissioner Ryan.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Darren, for that presentation and the dialogue we're having right now. I see that you presented a plan to get outcomes. And so my question is, when I see language about advertising, I think your advertising for the RFP is September, right, of 21?
Yeah, that's right.
So this is relationship work, and you listed organizations where it's necessary to build deep relationships and trust, whether it's Latino Built, PBDJ, OAMI, etc. So I just want to hear about the relationships that are being cultivated between now and September. So this isn't a cold, it's not a cold RFP, but it's actually a welcoming and warm one, so that then we can get the outcomes that we've been discussing. So can you give me a little more detail on the plan and the work that will go into building these relationships between now and when the RFP is public?
Sure, I'll try to explain some of the discussions that we've had, Commissioner. And of course, we haven't begun anything because we need to get authorization to proceed. But really the key thing is that we have contacts with these organizations so that we can communicate with them. They then can distribute the communication out to their membership of when these informational sessions are. So for example, we realize that the sessions should be held on different days of the week. Maybe we're going to have one preferably in the morning, one in the afternoon, to provide that opportunity for dialogue and start to cultivate the information sharing and basically try to get them more interested in our work. And so, we don't have anything more specific at this point because again, I think we recognize the need to have council agreement that we should proceed with this.
Okay, I think you'll get an agreement that we want you to build those relationships. So I think what I didn't hear, but I think it's implied, but just to make sure on the record, I just hope you pick up the phone. I hope that you go visit their sites. Hope you, now that you can go have a bite to eat with somebody, that you really take time to develop relationships. My experience is that that's the process. And just passing policy or putting out RFPs, clearly there's been some obstacles that haven't got us the outcomes we need. So I know this sounds really soft, and yet it's really, in my experience, the only way to get the outcomes you need. So I just want to hear that type of grassroots connection and focus, regardless of anything that we pass, for us to get the outcomes that we need. All right, thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really good that you're saying that because it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it's worked for me. So yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Ryan, I'm sorry, Kathleen Brenes-Marua for the record. If I could just add that procurement services will be partnering with BES to make sure that we're working together and outreaching to the various organizations, leveraging the relationships that procurement services has with these organizations. And they also have in-house assistance and support through a contracting team that we'll be working with as well, that have established some relationships as well.
And just continue to listen to what the obstacles are. Yeah, thanks.
Commissioner Hardesty.
Thank you, Mayor. Leveraging relationships that have led to the kind of outcomes that the city has had clearly means that we need new relationships and we need to build different types of relationships. I don't have confidence because you're partnering with procurement, because we've got the audits of procurement's outcomes. So again, we have to radically think outside of this little narrow box that we've been thinking in for the last 30 plus years. And what I have seen proposed today, I have no confidence that you will be able to achieve the goals that you have laid out because you have not laid out a plan that actually identifies what's failed in the past and how you're going to actually break through what our traditional outcomes have been. So again, I'm the innovation that I was promised is not what I'm hearing about how this is going to be implemented. And it's going to lead to the exact same, if we continue to do the same things we've always done, we'll continue to get the same outcomes. And you shared your outcomes and they were not, they didn't impress at all for the last time you did this. So that's where I am.
Thank you, Commissioner Hardesty. Any other questions before I ask for public testimony? Seeing none, Keelan, do we have anybody signed up for public testimony on this item?
No one signed up for this item.
All right, this is a first reading of a non-emergency ordinance. It moves to second reading. And colleagues, we're almost done. Here we have two more second readings, item 469 being the first.
Authorize one-year extensions for 7 grant agreements with youth servicing organizations in support of the Teen Collaborative Initiative for an additional per grant increase of $15,000 and a total increase of $105,000 for the 7 grants.
Colleagues, this is a second reading. We've already heard a presentation and had opportunity for public testimony. Is there any further discussion on item 469? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan.
Sure, thank you. Commissioner Rubio, I know you're not here today, but I really appreciated this item, and Director Long and the park staff and the community partners. I really enjoyed the dialogue we had last week. I thought it was really, important to really look at what was really lost, what was the void during the being shut in during the pandemic isolation. So I'm just really hope the summer months will offer more flexibility, and I'm really happy to know that more youth will be hired by the city of Portland. And I see there you are, Daryl Singleton. So anyway, rooting for you. It's a really important summer of healing and opportunity. I vote aye.
Hardesty.
I also want to thank Commissioner Rubio for her thoughtfulness in bringing this proposal forward. Thank you, Darrell, for the incredible work that you continue to do each and every day. And I vote aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Item 470, also a second reading. Please call the roll.
Mayor, would you like me to read the title first?
Yeah, I'm sorry. And I'm jumping ahead. Yes, please.
Thank you. Authorize architect engineer design services contract for Mount Scott Community Center seismic retrofit and expansion project for amount not to exceed $3,566,328 and add the Mount Scott Community Center expansion project to the Parks and Recreation System Development Charge Capital Improvement Plan.
Thank you, Keelan, and thank you always for your diplomacy. I appreciate that as well. Colleagues, any further business on this item? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Ryan.
Aye.
Hardesty.
Aye.
Maps.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. So that completes our business for this morning, correct, Keelan?
That's correct, Mayor.
All right, and colleagues, please make note of the fact we are not reconvening at 2 p.m., but rather 2:45 p.m. this afternoon. We'll see you at 2:45 p.m. We are adjourned.
Okay.